Good afternoon, members, officers and any members of the public in the public gallery or viewing the live stream. Welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Graham Cone and I am chairing this meeting. My Vice Chair is Councillor Stephen Drew, sitting to my right. I will introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. Committee members, may I remind you that you should have before you that the main agenda and supplement items 4 and 6 on that agenda. Those in the chamber are reminded that this meeting is being live streamed. By your presence here in the chamber and via video conference, you are deemed to have consented to being filmed and to the use of the images and sound recordings for a webcast archive recording. The normal procedure at Scrutiny and Overview Committee meetings is to review and make recommendations to Cabinet by affirmation. Only those members of the committee present in the chamber will be able to move, second motions or affirm. However, members present virtually may speak in the debate. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their camera and microphone remain off unless they are addressing the committee. For those of us present in the room, please ensure your microphone is close to you and speak clearly when addressing the room. Finally, a report of this meeting will be presented to Cabinet at its meeting on the 3rd, the next Cabinet meeting, So neither myself or the Vice Chair will be able to attend that meeting. Is any other member of the committee able to attend that Cabinet meeting? Councillor Anna Bradnam. Thank you for that.
I think I should be able to. If I am not, I'll let you know.
That's helpful. Thank you for that. Cheers. Yeah, okay.
So that's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. So we'll go over to the agenda item. So agenda item 1 is apologies for absence.
So apologies from Councillor Judith Rippeth and Sue Ellington and John Batchelor from the Cabinet and Councillor Henry Batchelor, who's not here, will be here shortly.
Lovely, thank you.
And substitute for Councillor Rippeth is Councillor William Jackson-Wood.
Lovely, thank you. So we then go on to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest that they would like to declare? Councillor Richard Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. There is a brief mention of South Cambridgeshire Investment Partnership in the budget section of the papers, and I'd like to remind the committee that I'm a board member of South Cambridgeshire Investment Partnership.
Thank you for that. Any other members of the committee have any declarations of interest to make? If you do think of anything during the meeting, please feel free to raise it as we go along. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 3, pages 5 to 8, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Are members happy that they accurately reflected the meeting that we held in November? Agreed? Agreed. Councillor Bradnam.
Just one point though, I just wanted to check on page 6, towards the bottom of the page, there's SH332, percentage of emergency repairs in 24 hours, and the head of housing undertook to circulate to committee members a briefing note. I can't remember if we've received that. We may well have done. I just might have overlooked it.
I think we did. We'll follow it up, Councillor Bradnam. Yeah.
Okay, and the other one was further up the page, AH211, the average days to re-let all housing stock. It was a suggestion that this KPI should be considered for revision, and I guess the housing department will be thinking about that.
Agreed. Yeah, it's in hand. Lovely. Okay. Thank you for that. So we now go on to agenda item 4, public questions. I think we have had a public question submitted from Mr. Fulton. Is Mr. Fulton, would you like to read your question?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Does the chair of the committee agree that local authorities should have some sort of process in place by which allegations of serious misconduct made by members of the public against an authority's head of paid service can be investigated and receive an adequate response?
So, in short, yes. We have routes for dealing with complaints. I am informed that you have been corresponding with the monitoring officer and that your complaint is being progressing. I'm very much the fact that we should not be discussing individual cases in public, and that you have been corresponding with the monitoring officer already. I think, it's not appropriate to discuss a live matter in public, but if you've got any supplementary questions, I'll be happy to take them.
I do. Thank you very much, Chair. Would the committee be willing to review a written report in relation to this matter and to consider the matter using the scrutiny prioritization tool for possible inclusion in the committee's work program in the future? Thank you.
Yes, we'd be happy to review anything that you submit and take that into account. Thank you. I don't think we've got any other public questions. No? Okay. So we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the corporate plan item, so pages 9 to 60. Who would like to start on this item?
Time's up.
Yeah. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to refer the committee to pages 59 and 60 of the report, which is an appendix, Appendix C, which was a survey that was done rating people's responses to the council's priorities in accordance to different demographic groups, particularly by age. There's a group of disabled people, a group of business owners. When I looked at this, I found it really interesting data, particularly in reference to the under 35's responses. Their responses are often at odds with the rest of the cohort of people's responses in terms of their priorities in different areas. And I would like to ask if we could make a recommendation that this data would be used to help us target how we communicate with younger people on the issues that matter to them. I think it would be a useful tool for us to, for instance, target communication about jobs, businesses, rural isolation. Those are issues that seem to be particularly important to this age group, bearing in mind the work that we did as a committee over the previous years, looking at how younger people respond to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. Leader of the Council, Bridget Smith.
Thank you very much indeed. So it's a really interesting observation, yes. It's hardly surprising that the priorities of the under 35s are different from older people. It's not surprising. And I think that's why surveys like this are actually so useful, because it would be only too easy just to assume that everybody's priorities were much the same, and they absolutely are not. And, I know this from going and talking to, there's a sort of younger person's body associated with Cambridge Ahead, and, their priorities is housing. That's what really matters to them over and above just about everything else. So I agree that, we need to look at how we use this data over and above it just being interesting, to make sure that we are responding to, you know, to the needs and the priorities of young people, because after all, you know, they are the future. And so I think there's an interesting piece of work that we can do on that. But you pick up the point particularly about communications. Actually, I think it's more than that. I think it's making sure that our own corporate plan is focused on the priorities of younger people, as well as the kind of, you know, the kind of overall stuff that we do as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lehman. Lovely. Councillor Richard Stobart.
Chair, thank you. I had a number of things I wanted to raise, but if I could just comment on this point, that the attention we gave to, I suppose, young people and their relationship, when we considered young people in the context of our task and finish activity, it was from teens through to mid-20s, you know, not up to 35 here, but it was a significant overlap. And we were very keen, you know, to hear that voice and get the engagement. I think the leader has commented on one or two things. But I think it just underlines the importance of the continuation of that effort that we put in through the task and finish activity. And we have gone back to it from time to time. But I think it would be helpful for it to be, in a sense, more formalised, so that it doesn't come up almost by accident. That we are reviewing young people's attitudes to things. So
formalised within the documentation that we've this, or
I've got a specific recommendation on that, but if it was to be on someone's agenda somewhere, and perhaps it should be on our agenda, to check this kind of feedback that we are getting from people who are, in some cases, below voting age. So, you know, they may not be fully engaged with the council's processes from the point of view of the democratic process, but they nevertheless have a stake. Yeah, a broad comment about, you know, how can we better engage young people rather than letting it come up as something as part of something else. You know?
Okay. Yeah. Did you want the leader to comment on that initiative? Yeah. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Yes, thank you. I mean, actually, what's the standout for me here is how altruistic these younger people are, because their top two priorities are support for older, disabled and vulnerable people, and working with partners to support the long-term unemployed. Now, that probably, you know, that relates more to their own personal experience, but, you know, they are altruistic, and, you know, they are thinking about other people, which is really nice. It's not just about what's in their own interests. But I agree, we could do some further analysis on this to help shape what we do.
Okay. Councillor Stobart.
Yeah, just in response to the leader's comment, Chair, I remember during the course of the task and finish activity, we went to Cambridge Regional College. And one of the first questions I got is, what is South Cam's approach to homelessness? And we were in the middle of a consultation at that point, so I offered to go back, and I never had the chance to go back, but exactly to that point. But when we got onto the topic of East Cambridge, or North East Cambridge and Hartree, what we call Hartree now, the question was jobs. How is that going to provide us with jobs? I think that addresses that other, or illustrates that other question.
Thank you. Councillor Bridget Smith.
I just accept what's said. Yes.
Agreed.
And I mean, I think, you know, we are successful in targeting the needs of young people, and, you know, we've had considerable success with the work that the planning and what the work Bonnie Quat's done through the planning service with the youth engagement work there. But perhaps we just need to shout a little bit more loudly about what else we're doing to meet the needs and priorities of younger people.
Lovely. Councillor Bradham, did you want to come in on this point, or yeah?
Thank you. Yes, just coming back on the point that has been made by others, about the altruism of the younger age group, just drawing your attention to page 60, where 69% of people under 35 thought it was important to think about reducing South Cambridgeshire carbon emissions. And I contrast that to local businesses where only 33% of them, so half, thought that reducing carbon emissions was important. Now, I appreciate there are different motivations for those two groups, but that's just evidence that our young people are very mindful of the future of the planet that they're going to be living in, and I think it's important that we take it on board. Are you happy that I move on to another point?
Yeah, Councillor Stober, I'll come back to you. We won't forget your other points. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. I'm moving back to the pages of the slides, as it were, the Appendix A, draft 2025-30 corporate plan. So I'm looking at, it starts on page 20, and I apologise, I don't want to take other people's questions, but I note that on these slides, where we've got the contextual overview, I hope that we're going to, I notice it says to be developed into a series of infographics, which is great. All I would observe is that it's not very easy to read the data on the page as it is. It's all useful data. And interestingly, this afternoon I've been at the Combined Authority where we had a demonstration and a presentation about the State of the Region dashboard, which we've pointed out should probably be called a portal. But anyway, this data has all come from there. And so I sort of wanted to take the opportunity to point out this data is available to everybody. Yeah. And it's an extremely useful source and for all of us to use. But for the purposes of this, I'm hoping that we get some rather more illustrative or tabular format of the data that we've got on these slides.
Thank you. Councillor Bridget Smith, do you want to comment on that at all?
Thank you. So going to your first point, climate anxiety is a very, very real problem for young people. And so, yes, of course, they care about climate change because this is their world that's burning up. And when we took SEAC to Comberton Village College, you know, the presentations we had from the young people there, you know, were incredibly impressive. You know, they were hugely knowledgeable and, you know, were coming up with very, very exciting solutions, you know, some of which we hadn't thought of. So, you know, this really matters to them and it's absolutely central to their lives. So, I mean, this is just a capture of some interesting bits of information. But the CPCA State of the Region work is extensive and extremely well presented. And if anybody wants to spend a happy few hours looking at LG Inform, which is the massive data set that the LGA run, which arguably was far better than anything that local government, yes, Offlog, now being disbanded, Offlog put together. You know, there's marvellous comparative data there, and you can really play around with it and do all sorts of comparisons. So, you know, there is lots of information there, and I think we've just, you know, captured this just to give you a kind of, a bit of an overview.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. Just the other thing is that if we are to believe it, this afternoon we were querying whether that State of the Region data will be live. In other words, will it be updated or will it be, you know, since it was last updated? And they did say they would try to make it as live as possible, which means it's an incredibly powerful data set. So we look forward to using that more. I have to say, it wasn't quite as intuitive as the person who was very familiar with it thought it was, but it's very good nevertheless. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. I've got a few things, and could I just pick up from Councillor Bradnam's point about the infographics, which or what are referred to Ledger's referred to as contextual overview, which I think are excellent. I mean, to put data in support of, what our strategic goals are, sets things in context. I mean, that's what it's called. It would help, and I suppose we could fast forward to this represented graphically, symbolically, in that kind of infographic way that we've come to expect. But I think always a comparison with something. Now, most, or perhaps a good proportion of the numbers are compared with or are ranked. But I think right throughout this list, just to set the context and to understand where we are in relation to an adjacent authority or nationally, or in some way to see where we stand, I think it would be very helpful to see the data in that way. So yes, pictorially, but also in comparison with, for want of a better term, our nearest competitors, or in a national setting. So if I could just park that one for the moment, and then some specific things. I just felt that some of the points made, and I'll just highlight page 25, the objectives could be more acute. They seem just a touch bland in places. And so on page 25, we would expect, for example, green spaces to be mentioned, and they are. But perhaps something more than access to green space. In other words, it is important. Urban trees we recognise important to, for example, overheating. The way we form, we do our nature recovery adjacent to areas of habitation, that matters as well. So it could be more acute. And the participation of young people, back to that theme, in sustainable homes and vibrant places, I think needs to be brought out as it does elsewhere in this presentation of objectives. If I could just move on to, I think, page 28, which is a presentation of some numbers. It'd be great to see some better emphasis or drawing out what is our transport carbon emissions, and that is mentioned there. But where is it coming from? Is it because we use too many buses? Is the car intensity too great? It's carbon emissions from transport in the district, which is really high, really high, and yes, yeah. So where things are really high, really low, they matter for us. Drawing that out would be helpful.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, it would be, in relation to the data and the comparative data, what I don't want is for us to be replicating, a vast amount of data which is readily accessible through the CPCA's work and LG Inform. I mean, there's no, what we've done is pick out some interesting little sort of scene-setting highlights. But, it is vast, the data that's available, and all the comparative data is there. I mean, I think you in particular will really enjoy LG Inform because, I think you will be fascinated by the comparison with nearest neighbours and similar councils and so on and so forth. So, there's no point in us replicating that. Everything is, the sources are all there. What we have here in the text, the reason it's not sharp is that this document's got to last for 5 years, and therefore underneath this sits an absolute myriad of other reports. So, you're talking about green spaces. Well, we have the local plan, we have the emerging local plan, we have all our environmental policies. So, this is the high-level text. And again, I'm very minded about, I want this high-level stuff to be readable and comprehensible to everybody living in South Cambridgeshire. And if we start getting terribly sharp and terribly detailed, we will lose people and they won't read it. So, you know, people want to know that we will invest in our housing stock, and we'll do so to improve energy and cost efficiency of housing across the district. Most people don't particularly need to know why we do that, how we're going to do that. We need to know how we're going to do that. Most people just need to know that we will do it. So I think you have to accept that this is a very, very high-level document which has to have quite a long lifespan, and then sitting underneath it here, you've got some detail over the actual action plan, and sitting under that is just tons and tons of stuff which, you know, we're all familiar with. So, you know, it's about this needs to be kept reasonably simple and as an accessible narrative.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. No, I just wanted to address a couple of the points that I think were made about comparisons, and especially in the context of employment and business. The officers have nicely put some links into the combined authority dashboards, and if you go into that, you can spend literally days looking at I'm just looking at business survival rates in the combined authority in South Cambridgeshire compared to all the other Cambridgeshire districts. So they really have done a good job linking that together, and that was very much the aim from our side, because that business and economic work is so closely interrelated across the combined authority. Thanks.
Councillor Richard Stober.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I completely agree. I mean, we're probably facing almost too much data, and the challenge is to have it condensed down to the point where we can actually act on it. But there is, as somebody who's recently pointed out, too much reliance on data takes us away from the careful judgment that we need to make as groups of professionals, as councillors and so on. So over-reliance on data can be also damaging. So getting the balance right, I think, is of great importance. May I, Chair, just bring up one or two more points?
Yeah, I think if you do one more, and then I'll bring in Councillor Drew, and and then I'll come back to you.
Yes. I think if I could just mention one example of something, and just perhaps, Chair, we could reflect on it for a moment. We've talked about partnership in various regards here, and I think that does underline the fact that we work closely with others in the work of the Council in delivering our objectives. But I just wanted to pick up one, which was the very poor access that we have in the district to rented accommodation. So if I could just reflect on, for example...
Can we just ask you which page and point you're on?
No, I'm speaking generally, Councillor Bradnam. And just maybe highlight this with some things that in the Girton neighbourhood plan, for example, are highlighting the fact that the houses are all the wrong shape to accommodate future needs. We've got 4-bedroom homes where we actually need 2-bedroom homes, and we don't want owned 4-bedroom homes, we want rented 2-bedroom homes. And so there's that great dearth of rented accommodation that suit the needs of particularly young professionals working in the area. So I just wanted to ask that, how in this set of objectives are we expressing the way we will work with partners to ease that process of delivery of the homes that people need?
So I'll come to you, Councillor Bridget Smith, about working with partners on delivering homes and so forth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There is a lamentable shortage of rental accommodation, both private sector and public sector. I think our council house building programme is actually really ambitious. And is going really well and being really successful. The devolution white paper has talked about housing responsibility for combined authorities, and my understanding is that will probably be retrofit and affordable housing, but we don't yet have the detail there. So there's another partner we will be working with to accelerate and increase the number of rental properties. But our strongest lever is through planning, and our ambitious targets for affordable housing and new developments, and of course, and I might well ask Tumi Hawkins to come in if I may, Chair. But we are building more houses in this part of the country than just about anywhere else, and actually we are achieving good percentages of affordable housing. So, we will never get to the end of the journey. We'll never get to the point where we can say, done that, there's enough, because the demand goes on and on. But if I may ask Councillor Tumi Hawkins to talk about
yes,
about this,
please do. Councillor Tumi Hawkins, Dr. Tumi Hawkins, I think she's joining us online. Are you able to come in on that point? Hello.
Good evening. Hope you can hear me.
Evening. Yes, we can, clearly.
I mean, obviously we are, we have our local plan and the housing delivery targets that we need to meet, but we're working very closely, obviously, with the housing department using the, the housing strategy. So obviously when sites come up, housing, our planners talk to housing in terms of meeting the 40% affordable that we require. And it's the, the level of 1 and 2 beds, 3 beds, 4 beds, all those, that requirement goes through housing, that, the applications that come forward to us should meet those. And if it's not meeting them, housing do the negotiation. But of course, we try and make sure that we negotiate to meet the requirements that have been specified to be met. I'm not sure there's much more that I can add to that.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Richard Stobart.
Well, thank you. I think that's an appropriate level of discussion, but I'd just like to perhaps underline the fact that these things are delivered through partnerships, and they are deep-seated needs that we shouldn't take our attention from.
I think that's been picked up. Councillor Stephen Drew.
Great, thank you very much. First of all, referred on to page 39. I really had written my numbers down correctly, otherwise we should be not in the right place. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? Yes. Sorry, taking too long. Let's get back on. Thank you very much. Okay, so I apologise, I have written down the wrong number. If you bear with me one moment, I will find the correct number. Can I suggest that you move on to the next person's questions, Councillor Combs? I have written down my page numbers wrong. I shall sort myself out.
That's no problem at all. So I just had a couple of brief ones following on from essentially what Councillor Stobart was saying. I actually agree with the leader that it's quite difficult to present a lot of information in this format, and actually the report does, in the text allude to the fact that there'll be the additional graphics coming into that, and it's sort of a live document. One of the things I think when we pull some of that data, which is good that we've done that, I think some of the things sometimes are a little bit hard to understand in this for the public. So if we looked, I made some notes just as examples of that. So if we looked at page 20, for example, you've got, it refers to the sort of 80-20 ratio on point 321, and it's sometimes hard. Well, I found it difficult. Some people might not, to sort of interpret what those ratios are sort of referring to. Again, if you looked on sort of page 24, for example, where it talks about sort of housing affordability ratio, and then you've got sort of 10.5. What does that actually mean to me or the public? Where we're talking, or then again, just under that actually, where we talk about solar panels on the next two bullet points down, I didn't know whether they were sort of private or council houses that was referring to. So some of it was a little bit, I found it a little bit hard to interpret. So that's my first point, if you'd like to address that, Councillor Bridget-Smith.
And I'm sure you're not alone, and we'll take that away and give it
Lovely.
further consideration.
Yeah, thank you for that. My second point was, I wondered if on, again, page 20, I think this, page 20, where we talk about fly tipping as total incidences, we've got 890 there. I wondered if we could bring out of that how many of those were sort of prosecuted against. So I think that would be nice to have that figure alongside that, if that was suitable for this document, which it may not be, but
It's a KPI, so we monitor that within our KPIs. But again, we'll take that away.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think the other points have been raised. So, Councillor Drew. Councillor Hobro.
Thank you, Chair. So I had one sort of top-level question, really, and then two or three detailed ones. So the top-level question really is about the fact that we now have 5 areas, sort of top-level areas that are listed rather than 4. Now, 4 of them sort of broadly correspond with the previous 4. I know they don't exactly correspond, but they do broadly correspond with the previous 4. And the 5th one, the one that looks to me as if it's sort of a new one, is the financially secure and fit for the future priority area. So my question really was to try and understand the rationale between moving from the 4 areas to the 5 areas. And I think we've always paid great attention to being financially secure and fit for the future, even though that wasn't stated as a priority area. So is this about communicating our ideas there mostly, or do these 5 areas reflect a kind of jiggling of priorities further down the system in themselves?
Thank you, and thank you for referencing that. So the 4 priorities we've had, actually they were manifesto promises prior to 2018 for us, and then they became the council's priorities. And we have looked at them at intervals. What has changed for us now is that we felt that Modern and Caring Council had kind of, if somebody said, what do you mean by that? It was becoming quite difficult to actually say what we meant. So, that's why that's what we've essentially split into 2. And of course, in these ever more financially challenging times, with councils falling over financially right, left and centre, I think it's very important that, our residents and our businesses know that, our aim is to be financially secure and fit for the future. And I'll bring in Councillor John Williams on that. But I think that is a lot of people's priority. So, the fact that, we are required to deliver best value, but to say that actually this is something that is a top priority for us, I think the time is right. The one thing that I really didn't want to lose was the being green to our core. And I wanted us to keep those words. The reason for that was actually when they did some of the corporate peer review, when people out there and people internally were asked what South Cambridge is about, they all went, oh, green to their core. So, that's really landed really strongly. So I think it's really important we don't lose that. But, I think it was right and proper that we were challenged on what Modern and Caring Council meant. And do you want to talk about the financial bit a bit more, if I may, Chair?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Chair. Well, actually, I
I felt I was being left out, so I wanted my own as well. No, I think it's expected that what's under financially secure and fit for future, which is basically about our resources and how we use our resources, is obviously embedded in all the other areas. But it wasn't clear when you looked at the other areas that that was the case. And so we felt it was important that we drew attention to that aspect, that clearly being financially secure and fit for the future is one of the foundations of this council to enable all the other things to happen. And therefore it was important that we spelt that out rather than assume that people thought and understood that it was implied.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Councillor Hobro.
So thanks. Yeah, that's very clear. I suppose my reservation about having too many priorities is that they sort of cease to be priorities when there are lots of them. So I felt a little bit uncomfortable about it going from 4 to 5. I would probably feel uncomfortable about it going up to 6 or 7. But I think the 4 and 5 area is sort of they can still be called priorities when they're when the numbers still that low. One thing that was slightly disappointing was to see that we no longer have affordable housing in the label. It says sustainable homes and vibrant places. I mean, I was very happy to see that affordability is still there in the key objectives. So it's pretty high up in the priorities. I wondered if I could just focus in on one or two details here. So the information that we've already talked about, which is on its way to becoming infographics, I think is really crucial in terms of context setting. And I love the infographics when they've come out in the past. They have been a superb way of setting that context visually and getting the information across really quickly. So there are just one or two things I wanted to mention. I think this is already, they've already sort of been touched on. Sometimes it's not entirely clear whether big is good or big is bad. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes you see a number and when it gets to the infographic, I think it has to be really clear whether we're doing better than, say, the average in the UK or the average in our region, or whether we're doing worse. And so some things like, I think Councillor Coe mentioned housing affordability ratio. Most people won't know what that means. And I had to check whether bigger was better or worse, and it turns out bigger is worse. And so I think for the infographics, then we really have to make sure that it's totally clear as soon as we look at it which way is good and which way is bad. So there were one or two that did stand out, and I just wanted to make sure that when I think there has to be a clear connection when we look at the infographics. If something stands out, then we have to see how the standout sort of filters through the system. And I think the affordability one does, in that there's a key vision bullet point about that. One of the ones later on, which Councillor Stobart referred to, was the one about transport, which I think sticks out like a sore thumb. We're emitting 50% more carbon per capita in transport than the UK average. Now, I appreciate that that's not something we have a great deal of direct control over, but we have a fair amount of indirect influence over it through things like planning, the planning system, and the ability to help install some of the infrastructure that will help to address this, bike racks, that kind of thing. But that wasn't mentioned in that didn't seem to filter down through the system, and that's one that sort of stuck out for me as being one that didn't quite link up. But I wanted to say, sort of in general, that linking the infographics with the list of the vision list is really important, and just highlight that one didn't quite seem to filter through. Thank you.
Can I bring in Councillor Milnes first? Is that okay, Khalida? Yeah, Councillor Milnes.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
We've just now had a couple of references to vehicle emissions, and of course, as Councillor Hobro has just pointed out, they are largely indirect, over which we've got no control. So our direct response to vehicle emissions is the decarbonisation of our refuse fleet, which was 65% or so of the total emissions in our district. Of our district fleet. But with the A14 and M11 as major conduits for heavy vehicles, for example, one's only got to look at the heat map of pollution in our area to see how much that is bound up. So it's every junction along the A14, it's every junction along the M11. There is a very much accentuated heat map of pollution, which is giving us a good indication of how that is caused by people passing through our district. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Milnes. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you very much. So thanks for pointing out about it being difficult to detect which are good figures and which are bad figures. We will look into that and try and find a way, I mean, maybe the colour coding way or something, to identify that. So thank you. We need to make these meaningful to everybody. On the subject of affordable housing, so the priority is now sustainable homes and vibrant places, whereas it was homes that are affordable for everyone to live in. Again, we know we spent considerable time reviewing this, and our group has reviewed it as well, and huge input from officers, from senior leadership, and cabinet also. So the fact that we are building places in South Cambridgeshire, other places are putting extensions on houses and building the odd 10 houses here, but we are responsible for new places. And this is my second scrutiny committee of the day, as is Councillor van der Weijers and Councillor Bradnam's, was we had the Combined Authority Scrutiny Committee, where I was there as the chair of the Environment and Communities and Housing Committee. And there, we talked quite a long time about how, it's outrageous that we're still building houses that are going to need to be retrofitted in 3 years' time. So again, this is the priorities that we had in 2018 necessarily do change, because actually the world changes. The South Cambridgeshire world changes, but actually, the UK changes and the world as a whole changes. And we didn't have the water crisis to the degree we had, back then. The energy crisis. We've seen climate change. Being far worse than anybody hoped. I think some of us all knew it was going to be. So we're having to respond to different priorities through our own priorities now. So it would be a mistake for us just to keep the same old priorities. And as you say, affordable housing is absolutely key to what we do. And we're one of the few housing stock owning councils left in the country. We're one of the few councils actually actively building council houses. And we have a very high affordable housing target for new developments as well. So, that's obviously still there, but the overarching priority needs to be responding to the new world that we're moving into. And then the other point was, I've forgotten.
So I talked about the carbon emissions standing out, and
absolutely, yes. And again, we talked about that in the committee meeting earlier today. Again, something that we have influence over through our partnerships. So a bit like the point that Councillor Stobart was referencing, and it's a real problem. But yes, we'll make sure, we'll take on board everything you say and make sure that what you feel are the highlights and the really important things are given suitable prominence.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. Did you want to come in on this point, Councillor Bradnam?
Just a couple of points. One is that at Corporate Parenting Subcommittee at the County Council, which I chair, we have such graphs that show whether things are good or bad or increasing. And we simply have an arrow saying arrow up is good, arrow down is good, if that's the way the data is going. So that's quite a helpful way of doing it and quite simple. And the other one is, you've mentioned about we're still building houses that need to be retrofitted because they were approvals given some time ago, whereas members of the planning committee, that both at South Cambs Planning Committee and at JDCC, the Joint Development Control Committee, which looks at applications on the boundary between the city and South Cambs, we are very insistent on very high quality of sustainability of houses which we are giving approval for. So we're requiring BREEAM excellence, we're requiring low use of water, we're requiring high insulation, we're requiring solar panels on the roof. All of these sorts of things then get criticised because they are conditions on a planning permission. But we are being quite insistent about new planning permissions being highly sustainable and, as we have said, to deliver houses that are affordable to live in.
Thank you for
Chair.
that. Noted. Lovely. Thank you. Councillor Hobro, you've finished your points.
May I just come back on one detail?
Yeah, you may.
Chair, thank you. So thank you very much for the answers. I just wanted to refer to the carbon emissions issue and point out that I think in this case, I totally understand what Councillor Milnes is saying about the fact that we're focusing on the things that we have most direct influence over, which is the emissions of our own fleet, and that's really important. However, in the scheme of things, the emissions of our own fleet are a drop in the ocean compared with the overall emissions that take place across the district. And in a case like this, I can see that it's tempting to focus on the things that we have most control over, but I suspect that our indirect influence on travel habits through the planning system is actually going to be greater in this case than the things that we can do directly. So I was slightly disappointed to see on page 29 that there was nothing about those indirect issues which I think could potentially have a greater effect than the reduction in emissions from our own vehicles. But anyway, thank you very much for the answers.
I'm happy to take that away and give that some serious thought.
And I think Councillor Milnes had sort of touched on some of those points, but I think...
Thank you. Point well
Thank
made.
you. I'm going to come to Councillor Tom Bygott next.
Thank you, Chairman. So my question is on page 14 of the Appendix A. Now, apologies, the online version I'm using doesn't have page numbers. That's in the it's in the paper version. Great, thank you. Yeah, so about halfway up that page, percentage of household waste sent for reuse, recycling and composting, 46.9%, third of 5 CPCA authority areas. And then on the following page, second bullet point, by 2030 we will reduce emissions from the council's estate and operations by 75%, a very numerical target. Followed by, we will support households and businesses to reduce consumption and waste while promoting reuse and recycling, which is not a numerical target or ambition. So I have in front of me our recycling figures for 2011, which says that in the 48 months, so 4 years since we introduced our blue bin system in 2007, South Cambridgeshire district, which doesn't include the city, averaged 55.8%. So South Cambs at that time, about 15 years ago, was doing 55.8. Together with the city, we're down doing 46.9. And my recollection was that South Oxfordshire was top in the country, and we were in about the top 5 or 6 in the country. Whereas we're now the third of 5 in the CPCA authority area, so the ceremonial county of Cambridgeshire. If you ask any person on the street what does South Cambridgeshire District Council do, the answer you'll probably get is they take away the bins, which is, I would say, one of our top, apart from planning and housing, is one of our top activities. So my question is, given how much better we were doing more than a decade ago than we are now, and how important it is in terms of the popular perception of what the council does, should we not make more of an emphasis on what we do with recycling? And should we not have a numerical target rather than a very general one that we don't really come back to and see how we've done. Thank you.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. If I may start off, and then I'll ask Councillor Warren Green to fill in any of the gaps. So the 75% target is from the existing strategy, all right? We currently don't have, numerical target for the second point there. The figure, the higher figure for recycling that you quote is pre-shared service. So, the shared service means that we are collecting refuse from a much denser area, lots of flats, and lots of places that are different to the rural South Cambridgeshire. So I think that's obviously had an impact there. My understanding is the two top performing councils in the country are Three Rivers and Watford. And my understanding is both Lib Dem controlled, by the way. But that aside, but I will bring in Councillor Warren Green for the sort of detail on it.
Thank you, Councillor Weigott. We have this week, in fact, been gathering a lot of information about recycling right through the region, with a new contract coming through for recycling for the coming year. The team have been looking very closely at what does this mean in terms of evaluation criteria for moving forward to make sure that we monitor right across that shared service how the recycling works. I think just give you a few indicators. The procurement process that we've used to move the service has looked at the fuels being used and the diesel replacements reducing the carbon emissions by 5%. We are looking at the electricity of the new MRF site and the renewable sources being primarily wind and biogas, which has come through in that process. The electricity meters being used, the residual waste processing on site and the own processing plant saving transport and materials. And we will be working with the supplier on developing the combined heat and power plant in the industrial estate with a view to utilising some of the power generated from that recycling, and so on. There are some other details, and I can actually share the briefing document with the committee, but this is just hopefully to just reassure you that there is an awareness that recycling has become something that we've boosted. We're collecting more recycling. Now to then redistribute the recycling, we had to work through a new process, and all of these things are being addressed through looking at how does our supply chain monitor and measure the emissions through and that might result from recycling and also transporting the recycled materials. So that gives you some reassurance that we have looked at this and there will be improvements being made in the future.
Councillor Tom Weigott.
Thank you, Chairman. So yeah, I'm a huge supporter of the decarbonisation in terms of the refuse fleet. I think electric refuse lorries are definitely the way to go, so I would applaud the council on that front. The reason I mention the point above about the 75% reduction is just to highlight the fact that we have numerical targets for certain activities, but we don't have numerical targets for others. And my question is, should we adopt a numerical target for the proportion of household waste recycled and composted, as we did more than a decade ago?
Councillor Natalie Warren Green.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, those numerical targets we will be building out with the new suppliers that we're working with. But yeah, absolutely agree that numerical measures are valuable. Looking at the carbon hubs that are being developed largely in organisations all over the world now to make sure that those targets can be tracked right through from what we can immediately control and what we need to monitor through the suppliers, absolutely, and that is one of the things that's coming through in the procurement processes of the whole supply chain we're using. So those numerical measures that will be very valuable. I think it's all work in progress, like it is for organisations globally, and I'm absolutely assured by the environment team that that has been built in the last few years and is growing, that these measures will be included.
Thank you.
Can I just point out, it is
Yes.
the only numerical target in the whole of the plan. It's the only number there, all right. So the rest is higher level than that. And as I say, that's because it's transferred over from the last plan.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bygott, is that okay? Anything else?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Libby Earl. Next.
Yes, looking on page 59, this is on business support really. I see that one of the priorities, the top 10 priorities for everybody, but especially for young people, who put it at number 3, is promoting apprenticeships for all ages to businesses. And yet, if you look at our statistics on page 32, we are second lowest of the 6 CPCA authority areas, and we offer about 1.6% for apprentices. So 1,667 per 100,000 of the population. We have said that we'll work with partners to promote the vibrancy, or with partners to promote apprenticeships and support the economically inactive back into work. And I know from experience, long experience of delivering apprenticeships, that some businesses, particularly small businesses, find it difficult, if not even daunting, to take on an apprentice. And we've said that we will support businesses. And I'm just wondering whether we actually do that by setting an example to businesses. How many apprentices do we know that the council actually supports? For instance, through the Public Service Apprenticeship Plan.
Thank you for that. I'll come to Councillor Peter MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair, and I managed to get my microphone working. So two or three points. First of all, on apprenticeships, Councillor Earl will understand we do as much as we possibly can through the combined authority in this area, but there's always room to do more. We have a slightly, and distorted is probably the wrong word, but if you look at the last point, that the proportion of the population, 16 to 64, level 3 qualification, so especially on the younger people, is the second highest of the authority areas. So we have this sort of skewed picture in South Cambridgeshire where we have a very high level of level 3 qualifications, but not such a good level on apprenticeships. I think, in answer to your question, it was 29. How many do we support? One of the things that we've also launched this year, and I think we've had 2 cohorts, possibly 3, are young people who want to start their own business, especially as either market traders or independent traders attending markets. And we're quite unusual in that. There's not many councils that offer a specific service. And they've both been oversubscribed when we've launched those programmes during 2024. So I think there's more to do on apprenticeships. It is something we're aware of. And when we're looking at the local plan and, for example, the development of the Genome Campus and Babraham and Granta, we've talked to all of the key companies in those areas to say, as well as the PhDs and very highly qualified, we also want to see more apprenticeships. And that's what we're actively trying to do at the moment. I hope that helps.
I think Stephen Kelly might be able to add some detail about what we're doing within planning.
Stephen, did you want to come in briefly on this point?
Well, it was just reflecting the conversation and some of the challenges that have been highlighted. It's pertinent because we're out to consultation at the moment on a Section 106 supplementary planning document, which seeks to fold in obligations to future Section 106 agreements. on exactly this, this issue. We have, as I think Councillor MacDonald highlights, sought to try and, where we can, exploit opportunities in some of our larger schemes. But it's quite interesting, we've been consulting, and we are still consulting, if anyone has any comments, on how we can capture the economic benefits for our communities more effectively through the Section 106 process. The metric about how we will be able to do that is something that we're waiting to hear from the consultation feedback from business particularly, and I know that the development industry is also discussing that obligation. And then on a separate thread, I suppose it's just a flag wave that directly South Cambs District Council, and I certainly know my service has spent some time in investing in apprentices to try capturing people from the local community to try and involve them in the planning topic. Liz can probably give an overall number of where the council's contribution is in this space.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I think that's useful in the context of your question. Liz, did you come in on this? Liz Watts?
Thank you, Chair. We have 15 apprentices in the council at the moment. We have 15 apprentices in the council at the moment.
Thank you for that information. I'll come back to Councillor Earl.
Thank you very much for that information. If we are encouraging local businesses to support apprenticeships, which I think is absolutely vital if we want to grow business in the area and support young people, perhaps we ought to give some thought to publicising how we lead by example. So those apprenticeships ought to be in the public domain. We should talk about them, and we should perhaps expand that if we can. But also when we run support for local businesses, we say, for instance, on page 54, that we'll run communications and in-person events encouraging businesses to promote the uptake of apprenticeships. Well, maybe we could work more with local colleges to run helpful events such as Train the Trainer for local businesses. People find it quite difficult sometimes to support learners, and because they find it difficult, they're reluctant to do it. And I do know, I used to work in the veterinary industry, and this was a perennial problem with small businesses, 1- and 2-person businesses, taking on an apprentice. So those sort of practical ways forward would be very, very helpful, and to publicise that perhaps more than we do. So, you know, we have really good intentions in this, but it needs to be crystallised, I think, more, particularly in this area.
Thank you, Councillor Earl. So I think the recommendation that you make is sort of twofold there. The first on publicising the good things that we're doing as a council, and the second is around working with partners on achieving more apprentices.
Indeed.
Indeed. Councillor Peter MacDonald, please.
Just two quick comments. So now our web pages are pretty active from the business unit that are links from the Open for Business newsletters. And we know from the clicks and the links that go through there that very often businesses are looking for support and guidance in terms of apprenticeships. So maybe that's something that we should focus on a little bit more. Okay. There are good contacts with the likes of Cambridge Regional College, where there's a lot of vocational work going on, and that's an area that you know the business team have been active and remain active in. Thanks.
I think Councillor Earl makes two very good points there. I think they've been noted by the Cabinet. So are you happy to move on, or yeah, lovely. Councillor Richard Stobart.
Chair, thank you. So if I could just dwell on page 25. So this is under sustainable homes and vibrant places. And particularly the first point, we will continue to deliver new high-quality council homes, etc. So I'm just using this as just a hook. It could apply to several other places, but we haven't used the word exemplar, I don't think. I could be challenged on that. But we have used it when we're describing, projects, I'm involved with the SKIP programme, and we have used the word exemplar in regard to what the goals of that project are. Now, I just wanted to broaden that out and ask the question, as this area with the challenges we're facing and the opportunities we have, shouldn't we be setting exemplary standards in what we do? And we do, our standards are very high. But if you look across the district, are we doing things which are, in a sense, class leading? Are they leading in the sense of being exemplary? And not just in appearance, but in the performance. So I know, for example, in the cities, there's a discussion of what would be a leading district heating scheme. And elsewhere, perhaps in the county, there are things which are kind of unique and leading. Now, we don't always have to do unique and leading things, but we are in a position to do that and to teach ourselves what are those good things. So it would be great to see exemplar coming up in amongst the objectives, because that would kind of drive this behaviour. What is excellence, and where can we lead, and where can we do the best and learn from it? Now, I just want to link that briefly
So
with...
just on that point, so let's address just that one first. So areas within the report where we can emphasise where this council is exemplar.
So I believe this council is exemplary in very, very many areas. And the fact that I have so many cabinet members going off to being asked to go to other councils to tell other councils how we do it here, I think is a good example of that being appreciated by other people. I think there's a danger here that in an awful lot of what happens here, we don't have total control over. So in relation to SKIP, because we do have a strong element of control, we are able to say exemplary. But, we can't just, I can't demand that major developers, produce exemplary, insist that we will only allow them to build exemplary stuff. We've already heard from Councillor Bradnam how actually, we are striving to ensure that developers are delivering the best that's possible. But as you well know, the sort of, we can't, there are these checks that are done when we're negotiating Section 106 and all the rest of it. And it's all about, the financial efficacy and viability of schemes. So I think there is an element of, pragmatism here. There's no point in us setting standards that are so high that nothing will get built. Because at the end of the day, people want a house, and we want them to have the best house they possibly can. But that doesn't mean that everything is going to achieve, what I would deem to be exemplary, but but may be considered absolutely brilliant to somebody who doesn't have a home, who then has a home. So I think there is, again, I had a very similar conversation at Combined Authority today. There's a very strong advocacy role for us and the Combined Authority to drive up standards, and I think we're seeing the results of that. So when I went to Waterbeach recently, where they are delivering 25% net gain at outset, before the houses are built. That's really impressive. That is exemplary, and they think they're going to achieve more. And I think that's because, the narrative here has been that, we, South Cambridgeshire, Cambridge City, our residents deserve the best, and actually we need, and I hope expect the best. But I think we have to be pragmatic about what we actually put in writing in a plan like this of things that are not within our total control.
Councillor Stobart.
Okay. So I agree with the leader's comments. I think creating hostages to fortune is something we should be avoiding. But on the other hand, an ethos which says we promote the exemplary. So some inclusion in this of us embracing the exemplary, or that avoids the trap, the obvious trap.
Yeah. I think that's been recognised by the leader. Yeah.
But nevertheless, is there. Is part of our ethos of embracing urban and civics 25% biodiversity net gain, or I think of you know, a development like Goldsmith Street, the Goldsmith Street development in Norwich, you know, which hit headlines and so on, but was the result of, you know, strategizing around what is best for the residents and so on. So, yeah, all I would say is, could we look for where to put exemplar as a word in the objectives that really captures the ethos which the leader has just expressed?
By the leader, where it's relevant in context.
I will look, but I'm not promising to do it.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's, yeah. Do you have another point, Councillor Stobart?
Just one more, Chair, and then I'll stop. Page 39, there's a comment on the arts and culture strategy, and you know, it's come up from time to time at Scrutiny, and this is a somewhat damning statistic, isn't it? That only it was the second lowest of 41 actions, support for arts and culture. But if I just reflect for a moment, you know, when we're looking at major planning projects, we will always talk about public art. And public art matters a lot. You know, it you know, reminds us of our heritage. It talks about our aspirations as a community. All of those things get captured in public art, for example. Now, arts and culture is not just public art, but it says that we as an organisation, if we have some kind of a policy, that we are interested and engaged. Now, maybe it's very low level, but I would very much like to keep it because we think it's important. We wouldn't be discussing public art in the context of planning if we didn't think there were some aspects of arts and culture that mattered to us. And we respect our heritage buildings, and you know, what is that if it's not part of our art and culture? So I just like to keep it. And I recognise that this is something we don't want to plough lots of money into necessarily, but you know, let's keep it a part of what we are because we do it. And I think it should be, in a sense, captured.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So we do have a policy on it, and you know, when Stephen's team are negotiating S106 agreements, there's always a public art component to that. I'm hoping he's nodding at me. He's nodding at me. So again, the statistics interesting, isn't it? I think it reflects two things. I think it reflects that, you know, we're in a cost of living crisis and so on, and things like, you know, housing and getting by and getting a job and so on are more important to people. But I think it also reflects that within South Cambridgeshire, people go outside for their arts and culture. They go to Cambridge, they go to London, you know, sometimes I go to Milton Keynes even. You know, they go, you know, we are, yeah, I think most people go outside South Cambridgeshire. So again, you know, is that sufficient? You know, we're very lucky to have Cambridge City with, you know, a plethora of arts and culture offers for us to tap into. And we don't have to pay for it, actually. And I know it's a massive burden to the city council. But, you know, if we haven't got a centre here at the moment in which to do that. We do have really vibrant community arts and cultures, and you know, and I've been on the receiving end of grants from this council before I did what I did now. You know, to run. You know, I think I did 5 years of Battle of the Bands competitions, which was heavily supported by South Cambridgeshire and the County Council and various other peoples. So you know, lots of stuff is going on. But the major offer, I think, is sitting outside. But yeah, we do have a policy, and it is implemented, and will continue.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bridget Smith. Is that
Chair, that's great. You know, to know that the policy will continue in some shape or form, but recognising those limitations which the leader has pointed out.
Good. Thank you for that. Councillor Heather Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was just actually in response to Councillor Warren Green's response to Councillor Bygott. I think you've got everybody in the right order there. In relation to recycling, many of us had communication from a resident concerned about the new contracts. And you mentioned supply, and that actually the recycling is being shipped to Northern Ireland, is their interpretation. Just wondered if you had any clarification on that as you refer to supply chains and looking into it.
Councillor Natalie Warren Green.
I do have information on that. Obviously, it's a live topic at the moment. I think a few residents are concerned about this. I think, again, to reassure people, the procurement process that was used to make a decision on who the next supplier would be that we work with recycling was robust. And I think the key concern of the resident that you're referring to and others were the carbon footprint. Is that correct? Yeah. The carbon footprint is a big part of the procurement process now. There are elements of the process that are obviously financial, and the ability of the recycling supplier to be able to deal with the quantity of recycling. Now, the supplier that we currently have, the contractor we're working with, unfortunately submitted a bid that was not compliant, and therefore we looked at, or rather the council and the joint authority looked at 7 different submissions. That one was disqualified. The one that won happens to be based in Northern Ireland. Part of that valuation criteria was definitely the carbon footprint. We have got a confirmation around what that supplier's policy is for tracking and for reporting the carbon emissions and the footprint that transporting the waste further could possibly impact. But within the procurement process, it was very clear that they've got a very strong commitment in doing this. There is a strong commitment for reducing their carbon footprints. And just to reiterate what I already said to Councillor Bygott, they are replacing their diesel fuels. They are improving the electricity in the site with renewable sources of electricity. There were electricity meters, so there will be measurables. There's a whole list of these things. Yeah. And that reassurance was given within the bid. The impact on carbon can't be tracked until we actually start using that service. But all the signs are that we're on very positive ground from a carbon footprint perspective, regardless of moving to Northern Ireland.
Thank you for that. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. So just to be clear, because I think there has been a bit of confusion, it's not a case of this company's based there. The recycler will be going to Northern Ireland, and there was no other way to keep it in the... Was there any other of those 7 that you listed that were sort of England-based or a bit closer?
Yeah, I mean, they were England-based, but the criteria that was used by the procurement team, it was very clear that this was the best solution from, with all the criteria around financials, around the space that they have, around the way they work, and including the carbon emissions.
Thank you. I think that's clear. Councillor Williams.
It was just that it's not that they're just based there, because anybody can be based anywhere in the world, but the recycler is going there. I think that was part of the
recycling. The recycling will be going there. It won't, and then it will be redistributed according to the policies and procedures, which will be tracked back through our supply chain to ensure that we are compliant with what is considered to be the reduction in carbon footprint.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Councillor James Hobro, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of small points.
Yeah.
The first really was to say thank you for the inclusion of the overall waste reduction element of this, which I personally feel is really important. I'm really pleased to see this there. So I'm referring to page 29, where it says, we will support households and businesses to reduce consumption and waste while promoting reuse and recycling. And so I'm really pleased to see that sort of coupling of waste reduction as well as promoting reuse and recycling. And I feel that doing those two together is is really crucial, and so I'm very pleased to see that as a headline vision. And alongside that, on the previous page, it looks as if, I haven't seen these figures before, but it looks as if we're at 4/5 of the total waste per household of the average for England, which is good, but we should keep trying to drive that down. So that was the first point, just to say thank you for including that as
I think
as
a
key
lot of that
objective.
has been covered already, but so your second point, yeah.
So the second point was a question really, and throughout the contextual overviews, sometimes it talks about 5 CPCA authority areas, and sometimes it talks about 6 CPCA authority areas. I found that quite confusing. I count 6, but maybe if you don't include Peterborough, it's 5. But I wasn't sure why.
It's joint, Cambridge and City is joined for Southampton's joint for waste.
Okay, so if I wasn't sure why it was sometimes 5 and sometimes 6, then I suspect that the readers also might not be sure. So just to make sure that when it goes out, it's clear.
I think that's noted. Given that, did you want to come back at all?
Just want to
briefly?
make one further point about. So yes, that's joint between City and ourselves. The other point is the existing facility can only capture 80% of the recycling.
Okay.
And there are no plans for investment to improve that in terms of, the growth of recycling. The new facility can cover up to 99% of the material through the plant with the projections that were given to them. And so that, again, should give reassurance that that decision-making was really robust. And we will be covering off more recycling.
Thank you for that. All good on that? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Drew?
In the interest of time, actually, no, I have one thing. Sorry.
No problem.
Thank you. Most of the things I'd raised have kind of been raised. I'd just like to ask the leader in relation to the recycling points that have been raised earlier. I assume the leader is aware that between 2011 and 2022, there was no increase nationally whatsoever in the amount of waste recycled from homes in England. So that therefore, whilst it is of course correct that it may well be the case that South Cambridgeshire has not dramatically increased its recycling rates from household, that is simply in line with national figures.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. Forgive me. So, Councillor Hobro brought this point up about, waste reduction. And, something has to be done to stop so much packaging being produced. I ordered one of these wall calendars the other day from a well-known supplier, and it came in a tube, but the tube came in a massive box, with loads of paper around it. I mean, why a label couldn't be put on the tube, I do not know, because it was a postage tube, but it came in a massive big box. So, I believe that, and again, we'll have to refer to Natalie here. The government are now taking moves to reduce the amount of packaging, and we are receiving, I think, quite a substantial amount of money that's coming from the essential fine tax on the producers, to help us. But hopefully that will be a diminishing amount of money as they actually reduce it, because I'm sure every single one of us is in despair when we go and do a shop in a supermarket and then fill our blue bin up with just loads of paper and cellophane and goodness only knows what else. So we can do so much. We need to be looking to the government of the day to be legislating to allow us to do so much more. But if I may refer to my colleague.
Thank you. Councillor Drew.
Yes, and just again coming back to the point about recycling and its relation to obviously the business plan. Whilst yes, it obviously would be very pleasing to see a significant increase in rates, and we do have to recognise that some other councils do better than we do. So therefore, the way in which Councillor Smith, you referred when the question was asked about exemplar activity, to the fact that leaders within the administration go and provide advice and guidance to other councils, which clearly represents exemplar conduct and behaviour. And also, I think another exemplar could be suggested to be the fact that the council welcomed the peer review with such clarity and such positivity. I just wonder whether it seems to be the case that there are high recycling rates, for instance, in Wales, but then Wales has a long-standing food recycling and collection system, which we perhaps don't have such access to and has not been pushed so well in England. And it's also the case that recycling rates within the EU are higher generally for household waste, but again, the EU countries are much more likely to have plastic and glass bottle recycling activities, which government has not been positive about. So I just wonder whether or not there is anything particularly profound or particularly different that the leader thinks that the council could be doing to increase the recycling rates, or whether you see it as something we just need to keep working on and hope that perhaps central government changes some of their conduct from the previous decade.
Thank you. Sorry, it's not working. I will go to my colleague for the detail, but I will just start off by saying we know we don't have all the answers. So in relation to food recycling, which we're going to have to be implementing soon, we have gone to Three Rivers to take learning, their learned experience in order that we can benefit from their best practice. But I'm sure Natalie has some more detail.
Briefly, yeah.
So I'll address the food point. The food recycling is something nationally that will be introduced, and it's being driven by DEFRA. The funding is coming in from May 2026, so it's not this year. We've got a whole year to go. So we've got 12 months to work on what does that look like, and how can the team facilitate collecting food alongside green bins, for instance, and the blue bins, and make sure that as a result of collecting those, we are not adding more carbon by having more lorries on the road and trucks on the road. So that whole, all of that thinking is going into the calculations. When we get to the budget, you'll see, we're looking at 100,000 going into that food collection. From 25 to 26, in consideration of it, DEFRA will be match funding as far as we know. So we're waiting on DEFRA to tell us exactly what that funding will look like. And when we know that, we'll be able to stipulate exactly how we are going to deal with food. That will have a really positive impact on waste in general. And it should drive behavioural change to get people to put their food into the right bin rather than into black bins. At the moment, we're expecting to put them in the green bins, but often they are going into the black bins. And so this whole initiative from government and working with them and getting some funding down, DEFRA should really help right along the chain of the waste collection.
Thank you. Lovely. Okay, very quick. So we need to move on, Councillor
Absolutely.
Bradley.
I just wanted to point out, thank you very much for the answers from the lead member for waste, but I just wanted to remind us here at the District Council, we are an authority that is responsible for collection of waste. The County Council is responsible for contracts for disposal. So whilst absolutely we're working with them, actually the contracts for disposal are with the County Council, so that's not business that's within our purview, except as partners. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bradley, and I'm sure that's noted amongst all councillors. So I think if we come to page 9 of the agenda, where it asks us to review this document, make suggestions and so forth, we have done that as a committee. Is everybody happy that that is the case, and we've given some recommendations and so forth to the Cabinet?
Agreed.
Agreed. So we will now move on to the next agenda item, which is the agenda item on the budget. So that's agenda item 6, and I'll take this in 2 parts. So we'll do part A first, pages 61 to 130, and then we'll come on to part B to follow. Can I just remind councillors that we will be seeing these documents at full council, and ideally, they are clearly both, political documents. So, where we can reduce risk, add value, comment on, are these documents in a fit state to go to full council. I think that's where we should be focusing our attention rather than the politics of what's in and which we can do at full council. So if we start with 6A, Councillor Helen Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about national insurance increases and where we would see that in these budgets. I'm assuming that it will be a sort of hidden cost pressure within various lines of each department where there is staff. But I wondered whether it would be possible when this was brought to full council, if we would be able to extricate that in some way, just to say how much the national insurance costs had put a sort of underlying pressure on our budget. You know, if we're seeing increases across the board and 2% of it is down to national insurance increases, it would be really helpful for us to be able to see that.
Let's just take that one point. Councillor John Williams.
Yeah, the national insurance increase has been put into these budgets, but you are as you know, these are expended. Shows only one side of the balance sheet, so this shows the expenditure, and obviously some of that national insurance increase will be offset by grant that we get from government, but we're not sure at the moment what that grant. I'll pass over to Peter because he's got the latest information on that. But these figures do include a new NI figure.
Peter Maddox.
So, yeah, as Councillor Williams has just said, yeah, the NI costs have been put in to the budget. We think it's about £375,000 worth of costs overall within the budget. We can certainly, in the final budget report that comes forward, we can certainly pull that figure out. What central government has said so far is that they will compensate local authorities for the additional cost. Now, from what I've seen, there's a number of options open to them in how they're going to compensate us. They haven't actually decided which option they're going to use, but I've looked at all three options, and I don't believe any of the options will completely compensate us for this. But hopefully in the next week or so, we'll have a better idea of what that is going to be, and we can then introduce that into the budget figures. But at the moment, we're just including the cost, but not any estimate of the compensation.
Thank you for that. Councillor Helen Lehman.
Thank you. I think it would be really helpful for us to have that in the global summary of the document, because it will be subsumed within each business line, I suppose. Wherever there are people employed, you won't necessarily see it. And, you know, when it's a small amount within many small amounts, it doesn't look like a lot, but actually in aggregate it's probably significant. And it would be very helpful if you could explain how much grant the government actually finally came up with, and what the gap was, and actually how we've managed to meet that gap. I'm wondering whether we have any earmarked reserves for sort of emergencies, you know, unforeseen things like this, that have costs that have come onto us outside our control.
So on that recommendation, Councillor John Williams.
Yes, as I said, you know, what you've got before you here is the expenditure and the expected expenditure for next financial year compared to this one. I must say that actually this is a very challenging budget, because if you look and compare it with the budget for this year, it's about 3.5% less than we budgeted for this year, despite all the additional costs that were faced in inflation. So, you know, well done to the senior management team with that. But yes, certainly when you come to see the financial figures, you will have the MTFS, you'll have, you know, what we expect to receive from government, and yes, you'll then see exactly what, how we, you know, I'm hopeful that actually we won't need to take money out of reserves, because we may well have additional income from taxation that will offset this, but we're not absolutely certain at the moment on that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Helen Lehman.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I don't have anything else to say on this other than if you've actually managed to reduce the overall cost, even though there are these underlying cost pressures that have been enforced on us. That's all to the good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Councillor Peter Sandford.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask if the cost of local government budgets, and I understand the process is in a very early stage, if it's not, what will be the steps, for example, supplementary budgets, revised budget later in the year to accommodate the inevitable costs?
Councillor John Williams.
Well, we have to work, you know, it's business as usual until we know exactly what is likely to happen. And then once we do know that, and we won't know that until next year probably, because we don't have to submit, because we're not asked to submit the details until this autumn. So it won't be until next year that we will have any idea what the financial consequences will be.
Thank you for that. Councillor Peter Stamford.
Thank you for that answer, Councillor Williams. I'm thinking there need to be some early steps on this, for example, beefing up the transformation team to cope with the extra work. Would that come earlier than the actions that you mentioned for next year?
Councillor John Williams.
Well, one thing we don't do is crystal ball days. So, you know, we will be sticking to a budget that is for this council. And then obviously at some point down the road, we will then see exactly what is going to happen. And then we will need to make changes or recommendations. But we won't, I mean, at the moment, you know, I don't speculate, we don't speculate, which is probably why we're in such a good financial situation. We go by the facts and the worst case scenario, and that is what's taken us through to where we are today.
Thank you for that. Councillor Peter Stamford.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. No further questions.
Do we have any further speakers on this? Councillor Richard Stobart.
Chair, could I just check one thing? So I was just going to, it was just one item in the Chief Executive and Chief Operating Officer's budget that I wanted to comment on. So we're on page 68 and the title of the topic there is Data and Intelligence. And this is really more of a comment because we have, I think probably somewhere between employment and staffing and scrutiny, just been watching the if you will, the investment and the emphasis and the, if you will, definition of the data function within the district council, and it's really helpful to see that kind of growth in budget corresponding to the ambitions that we've discussed, and so I did want to just raise a question about where we're going with data, and then how we might, as Scrutiny, engage with the data process. So the growth of data volumes is enormous. It's diverse. You know, in a recent discussion, I think at the Rural Services Network, did a special kind of feature on handling data, and there are communities that are using, for example, footfall data and car parking data in order to, well, it's being done centrally at the county level, but it's helping communities understand, well, who are the visitors? How often do they come? What are the patterns? Particularly useful for business. So the data opportunity is huge, but let me distill this down to a question. How are we, for example, there's going to be routine data processing, and from time to time, and I hope Scrutiny Overview might do this, would ask a specific question of the data team to serve a particular inquiry that we wanted to pursue. How will that work, and could that be accommodated by the kind of team that we're looking to fund in the years to come? So okay, I hope that's clear as a question, Chair, but you know, I'll elaborate if needs be.
Yeah, so around the sort of data team and how we look at that in relation to the finances. Councillor Brian Milnes wanted to come in here.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's relevant to talk in this context about the appointment of our new shared service Chief Digital Information Officer. Councillor Stobart rightfully talked about business as usual and what we can do there. And we've come a long way in the last 5 and 6 years in creating a stable environment. But one of the opportunities that we now have, and one of the job description
I think we've lost Councillor Milnes there, so we'll come over to Councillor John Williams, please.
Oh, okay. I think I've recovered whatever happened there.
Councillor John Williams, I think, with the connection's a bit unsteady. Sorry.
Sure.
I think we got the gist of what Councillor Milnes was saying. Let's come over to Councillor John Williams, please.
Yeah, I was just going to make the point, Chair, that this isn't just number crunching for number crunching's sake. You know, it's not just for people that like figures and pore over figures like myself. This actually is serving a very good purpose for our residents. For example, this includes the software that we purchased recently to identify people who are on benefits, who aren't claiming, for example, housing benefit. And already we've, you know, local residents have had some £10,000 of benefits from the government because we told them, actually, there's a benefit here you should be taking up, which they're not. So this data is actually really important for our residents in supporting them, particularly at this time when we have a cost of living crisis. So this is why, you know, this is it may not seem number crunchy, may not seem to be very sexy, but actually it is vital for us serving our residents.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. I'll come back to Councillor Stobart. Yeah, you happy with that? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. No, I completely agree. I mean, this kind of, if you will, specialised and, you know, recognise this thing as a professional specialisation in which we, you know, need to create a degree of expertise. Absolutely right, because it will make us more acute. And I think the lift, the reference that Councillor John Williams made to the lift system, excellent. You know, the kind of thing that we've been trying to do at parish council level. Parish councillors say, you know, how can we possibly direct our efforts, you know, quotes collectively, large collectively, how can we direct those efforts to the people who really need the benefits?
Yes, and I think Councillor John Williams has answered that point. So thank you for that. So I think we'll move on. Councillor Tom Bygott.
Thank you, Chairman. So my question is related to a similar topic. So the line above data intelligence in Appendix 1, the first page of numbers there. And apologies, I don't have the page numbers because they're not on the electronic version. So the line item above data intelligence is called corporate, page 66.
No, he's definitely looking at page 66. I can see it.
So the line item is corporate management. And if I scroll down to the following page, the corporate management service encompasses costs of the executive teams along with key expenses, etc., etc. The increase in the 2024-25 probable outturn is primarily driven by additional consultancy and consultation costs. And my question is, how does that relate to the line item entitled Transformation Support Services from Appendix 7? So that's for under the head of transformation. And I note there that there's also 215,000 of corporate programme, in addition to the 4.75 million transformation support services. We heard a minute ago about the 108,000 for data analysis. But then, of course, there's also the policy and performance, 213,000. And so my question really is, how are all these items of expenditure on analysis, consultancy, data review, etc., related to one another? And as a total, how much does that all come to? And what percentage of that is that of this authority's total budget? Thank you.
Councillor John Williams.
And obviously this is quite a detailed response, so I'm quite happy to write to Councillor to respond to that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to do a written response. Officer Peter Maddox, would you like to, are you indicating to speak there?
I think with something like that, we'd have to look at the detail because we've got, you know, some of the items relate to specific services, some might relate to more corporate items. I think we'd probably have to look at that in a bit of detail, because I wouldn't be able to say off the top of my head, certainly the last bit of what percentage that is of our budget. So I think it'd be better to provide some sort of written response, if that's okay with Councillor Bygott.
Okay, so we'll have a written response to that. Councillor Bygott, did you want to come back on anything?
Yeah, I'm just I'm very much looking forward to seeing that written response. But just, could the leader say off the top of her head what sort of ballpark that would be, and what would be appropriate for an authority of this size?
No, I can't.
That's fine. I think we'll have a written response, and yeah, lovely. Thank you. Okay, so we've got no further speakers on this, so I think we will go to the recommendation, which is to make sure that these papers are in a fit state to go to full council, which I think we've made comments and scrutinised those accordingly. So is everybody agreed that we've done that? Agreed. So now we will come on to agenda item 6B, the Conservative Group budget proposals, and as you know, that's on the additions paper that we have. So who would like to start on that? Any comments or areas where you want to make recommendations, scrutinise at all? On part B? If not, we can move on, if nobody's got any questions on that. Okay, fine. Very easy job there, Councillor Heather Williams. Okay, fine. Okay, so yeah. Fine. Okay. So I think again we will come to the item 6B and say that they are in a fit state to go to full council and be debated. I propose that we have a 5-minute comfort break. So we will do that now. So we'll come off the live stream for 5 stream? Lovely, thank you for that. So we are now on agenda item 7, the 4-day week consultation, pages 131 to 222. Who would like to start on this? Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. This consultation is reviewing the council services and the residents' experiences of using all our services across the council. I'd like to ask the leadership team what work they've done to ensure that this is a comprehensive document that covers all the services that our council provides. Thank you.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So we have, so we have put considerable effort into this consultation to ensure that it is meaningful and valid. So we have, sorry, I'm just trying to find some, the name of the company that we've been working with, which I don't have on the tip of my tongue here. Sorry. Oh, right, thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we've commissioned DJS Research. Actually, I think they are doing are they doing the whole thing or just the? Yeah. Okay. Yep. They're advisors. Okay, so DJS Research, who are an independent and expert market research company, and we've been taking advice from them. It's taken a long time for us to get to this point where we feel that what's going to be included in this consultation is right, it's accessible, it's comprehensible, it is it's going to provide us with meaningful information on what our residents' experiences are of our services. So this isn't us doing it behind closed doors. We have taken copious amount of expert advice and legal advice as well to make sure that we are being legally compliant and that this is going to be a valuable piece of work in the future.
Thank you for that. Councillor Leeming.
I have another question, but it's not a broad one, it's quite a specific one. I don't know whether perhaps other people may wish to...
No, take it now.
Okay, I'll ask the specific one then. So we're looking at it in its written form at the moment, and I understand it will probably look different when it's online. I just wanted to be... that there are a number of choices where if an individual is looking at, say, for example, the planning service, it may be something that they never use at all, and there isn't an option to say, I haven't used this. There is I think the way the questions sort of flow through, have you had contact with the service since January the 1st? And then it takes you into a box which would be since January the 1st, 2023. And then it pushes you down to another question, which is before January 2023. You may only have ever used it once, and I'm not, at one point in time. And I think having the option, don't know, perhaps wouldn't give clear information if you've only used it once or you haven't used it at all. It's quite a sort of technical question of how the survey works, and it may be something that's more transparent online rather than on a paper. But just wanted to check.
So I'm going to ask Gareth to come in with some detail, but just to say, I think this will be an online survey, and as you know from online surveys, you answer one question and then it jumps and takes you further down the line, so that you're not wasting your time. Having to read questions which are not relevant. So, as I say, considerable effort's gone into this, and it has been trialled. So that I think every option is covered. But I'm just going to get Gareth, who's been leading on this, to do the detail, please, if I may, Chair.
Yeah, I think that's working. Yeah, I think I understand the question. So those questions are sort of blocks, aren't they? So first, it's asking you, have you had contact with the council? Planning was the case that you mentioned there, since the time when 4-day week working was introduced. Because the consultation is around 4-day week, the purpose of that question is to kind of, as we've said, is if there hasn't been contact, you'll move quickly onto the next set of questions and the next service. In regards to if you haven't had any contact, you're going to kind of be moving on, and you've still got other opportunities to give more general comments further on in the survey. If you have had contact there, then in effect you get to kind of give us your rating of your experience during those two periods, kind of post and pre 4-day week. The don't know questions is simply because people are not always going to be sure, and we had a good debate around that. The rationale is that if people don't know, it's better give them that option than them to kind of make a guess around how they feel the service has been, which may not represent actually what they feel. So I think I answered that question, but if I haven't, please say so.
Thank you, Gareth. So if it sort of, I understand it will sort of funnel you down things and drop things off if they're not relevant to you. I'm looking at page 144, I'm looking at benefit service, and that would be another service where maybe the person responding to this may or may not have used it. I guess if it was bins, everybody's had service from the waste collection. But for instance, if you said, have you had contact with the council's benefit service since January 2023, it would take you on to question 6, and then question 6 has A and B. Now you may only have had contact since January the 1st. If you had, then it asks you about before January the 1st, would you be able to say, no, I've only used it once? Yeah, that's my question really. Is it smart enough to be able to filter out one-time users?
Gareth Bell.
I think it's a really good point. It's something that we're jot down. Obviously, it's the leader's decision here, but I think it's potentially a case use that it is one for us to think about. So it's a really, really helpful point.
I think the leader's nodding her head there.
Well, yes, but also there are text boxes. So, there's opportunities to put in any amount of information within those text boxes. So if people feel the urge to say, I've only used this once, so I don't feel able to make representation, then they can do it within the text box. So I think we will have a conversation about whether those text boxes are going to suffice or whether something else needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman, is that?
That's it from me, thank you.
Councillor Drew?
Thank you. If we just look at the leader, from your perspective, what is the purpose of this consultation?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you very much indeed. So the purpose of this consultation is to ascertain what the experience has been of our residents, our businesses, our partners, and so on, our stakeholders, during the 4-day week trial. Has there been any change in people's experience of our services as they experienced them prior to the trial starting and as they have experienced them during the trial? So this is, useful, very useful information which will either support or not the vast amount of evidence that has been analysed for us about the trial by the universities of Cambridge and Salford. So additionally, there is a legal requirement for us to consult. So it's very important that we fulfil that legal requirement, and it's very important that we do so in a way that is legally compliant but also meaningful. So it's very important to us what our customers of all types think of us and what their experiences have been. And this, along with all the other information that we have, the surveys of our staff, the KPI data, and so on and so forth, will help us as a council, as a cabinet, to make an informed decision about whether, during this summer probably, we become a 4-day week employer.
Thank you, Councillor Bridget Smith. Councillor Drew.
Do you want to add in? May I ask my colleague if he wants to add anything to that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, it's important. Go back to when we were talking about the business plan. One of the things we said in the business plan was that we will base our actions on evidence. Okay, so what we do in this council is based on evidence. The purpose of this consultation is to provide us with more evidence to support the KPI evidence, so that when you come to, debate this in July, you will have evidence not just of KPIs, but evidence from our residents and our businesses and anybody else who's used our services to understand what effect the 4-day week has had on the delivery of our services. So this consultation is really important to deliver that, as well as to ensure that we are legally compliant in the way that we conduct ourselves. So that is the purpose of this consultation, is to find out how our services have been delivered during the 4-day week.
Councillor Drew.
Excellent, thank you. So just go back to Councillor Smith. So would I be right in picking out from the answer that you've given and Councillor John Williams has given, that fundamentally you are focused on the experience of those who are using the council services, and what we are seeking to do through this consultation is have a stronger understanding of the experience of users, and that is the number one priority?
Yes, exactly right. And actually, it's a useful exercise to do even if we hadn't been embarked on, even if we hadn't done this trial. It's very important for us to know, what that experience is, good or bad, because as it is, people send in compliments, they send in complaints, but that's very little information. So hopefully we'll have a good response to this, and so we are targeting quite a wide range of stakeholders. So thank you.
Libby.
Councillor Libby Earl.
Yes, I was wondering, the item 24, who will actually be surveyed, the survey specific groups, online public consultation, a survey of 1,000 local residents and businesses, and that would be presumably the best value due to consultation. And I'm wondering if that sample size is large enough to capture a valid picture of all the different groups who actually use our services. Because when you divide that down into age groups and perhaps people who've used the planning service, people who pay business rates, there are a whole raft of different groups within that. And I'm a little concerned that 1,000 of local residents and 400 businesses may not be large enough to actually give us a valid sample. And it will be the most important part of this survey, because the public consultation, although it's important, people who fill in surveys voluntarily, and particularly ones with 80 questions, tend to be the unhappy and will give us bound to give us a somewhat biased view that way. So that 1,000 really does have to be representative. I'm just wondering if that's actually going to happen, given the number of different things that's got to actually cover.
Thank you for that, Councillor Earl. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So my understanding is that this is the industry standard. So that's what's used for political polling and all sorts of other things. As well as the 1,000 residents, there's also 400 businesses there. Something similar has been done by the GCP recently. But if I may ask Gareth to add some additional information, because he's spoken to these people a lot.
I think it's a really good question. It's one that we pondered for some time, but we took advice from DGS Research, and we've actually gone probably for a larger sample than we could have done. We had some options that were smaller, and in effect, the expertise from the sort of polling company, your kind of confidence in the survey, the benefits that you get from having a larger pool, it does kind of evaporate slightly after that point. So it did feel like that was kind of the sweet spot in regards to cost and having real confidence in the survey, but we definitely did have a lot of conversation to make sure that we considered that point.
Thank you for that. Councillor Earl.
No, that's fine. That's answered the question.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So the survey itself is quite complicated. It covers a number of areas. It covers a number of stakeholders. How will the results be presented?
Thank you for that. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Well, there will be a report. I don't think I know quite what that report's going to look like, if I may ask Gareth. Thank you.
Gareth Bell.
Thank you, Chair. So the reason for the grouping is to help councillors understand who they're hearing from. As councillors have already discussed, being a resident within South Cambridgeshire or within Cambridge City, because we've got those key shared services, you're going to be consuming local services and be able to give your experiences there. The survey is going to be open, broader. The main consultation survey will give an opportunity for a wider group of people to respond, so we can provide all that information. So the idea of how the survey will be presented is it's to present the kind of raw information and a summary of the thematics that have come through the survey, and obviously it will be for you as councillors to determine how you determine what sort of weighting to give to those responses and how to factor that into your final considerations.
Thank you for that. Councillor Richard Stover.
No, that's fine. That's a good answer.
Thank you. And Councillor Anna Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. Whenever I start a survey, I always do it thinking, how long is this going to take? This is excellent, and I think we're going to get some very rich data from it, which is wonderful. But for the person taking part, I would like to see an introductory paragraph or infographic that just shows the following things. One, which is at the start, an outline of how the questions are going to be arranged. So that would be, there will be questions on A, introduction, B, about you, C, questions on 16 service areas, D, then a question about the four-day week, and then E is the demographic monitoring, F is the business profile, and G is the thank you, or something like that. But people need to know, within those sections where you've got questions on service areas, they need to know that they are going to be able to skip at that point if they haven't used them. So I would just like some, just broad, it doesn't need to be a great big thing, it's just so that people know how they're going to be, it's like a route plan through the questionnaire, so that people know how they're going to be taken through it. Because if I haven't got that, then I will go to the paper copy and print the whole blinking lot out, so I know what I'm going to have to fill in. Because you might start to write detail here when actually it's covered by a question down here. So that's one thing. And the final thing is an estimate of time.
Let's address that first, yeah.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure I agree with you, actually, because I think there's a real risk of putting people off, and we don't want to put people off, but we will discuss it. But I have to fill in a lot of surveys I have to fill in a lot of surveys because of my job. And actually, I always look at how long is it going to take. Now, this says an absolute maximum of 15 minutes, and that would be for somebody using every single one of our services. And actually, not many people are. I think for a lot of people, it's going to be about 5 minutes. So I agree with you. We need to have a think about saying in the introduction, this is likely to take. But I think if we start saying you're going to be asked about 16 service areas, people are going to run a mile, quite honestly.
What I mean is the route map through it. And also, don't forget...
I think people can move backwards and forwards through it. So, you know, you can. So I quite often do a quick whiz through.
Well, it's not obvious that that's going to be possible. Sorry, I'm through you, Chair. What I'm just saying is that I think it will aid people navigating their way through to understand that this is the bit where they're going to be asked about services. We don't have to say 16 if you don't want to, but that they will be able to skip bits. And I just think some explanation of how they can follow through and they can revert back, it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think
and also I would say the estimate of 15 minutes might be if they have all that information handy So, for example, I might think, oh yeah, I did do a planning application, but what year was it? And you might have to hunt back in your own paperwork to find out when you did it and all your emails.
I think
you know,
we
do you
get
see what
the
I mean? I
gist
think we
of-
just need
Yeah,
to
no,
give people
I
a
understand.
clue.
Could I ask Gareth to just
Gareth
respond,
Bell.
please?
Thank you, Chair. So I think we've got two important points there. I think that in regard to timing for the survey, it's a broad range because it does completely depend on your experiences. But totally understand that it can be helpful. So we've taken down that point as something to take away. In regards to the kind of route map, again, I can see a way that we can do that. I think we totally understand the point, Councillor Bradnam, so we'll obviously discuss that with the leader, just to decide the way we can just make that slightly smarter for residents, but it's doable, so that's really helpful.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bradnam.
That's great. It's just to help people navigate. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Peter Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the council would prefer that residents respond to this consultation online. However, we have a significant number of, shall we say, elderly residents who are probably horrified at the idea of completing this on their phone and don't have access to a computer. I'm looking at the number of pages in the paper copy and it's overwhelming. I wonder if I can ask the comms team to look at design devices to shrink the number of pages and not scare our residents off.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bridget Smith.
So obviously residents won't be getting all the, they'll only be getting the sections that are pertinent to residents. So they won't be getting the business sections and so on. So, it will be shorter, but again, I'm going to have to ask Gareth about how we're going to manage
Gareth
that.
Bell.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's quite a challenge because we've also got accessibility that we have to consider around font and size, and that's why the pack in front of you is the kind of the layout is. So I think it's a good point. I do think that we'll be, as always, it will be heavily dominated by online responses, and we do have kind of a good range of people who will respond in that way. I think we've got people who are digitally excluded covered in our plans, and we can provide surveys kind of on response. But in regards to perhaps being a bit smarter with the layout, it is a challenge because also stereotypically we're probably talking about a group that probably is not going to favour very, very small print and something that's kind of changed around. So I think we might be a little bit limited, and it's the nature of the survey that you will actually go through those pages very quickly, but it is something that there's no doubt that the layout digitally is much friendlier.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you for that. Do you have an estimate of the number of pages the average resident may receive in the paper copy?
Gareth?
It is the appendices. I'm just not quite quick enough to be able to look at this read. So in your appendices, you've got so South Cambridgeshire resident papers. It's the whole of Appendix D is for a South Cambridgeshire resident. So in your pack, the whole of Appendix D. Okay. So at the bottom of the main report, it gives you Appendix A through to E, and Appendix D is the full survey. And my colleague here, Michael, is giving it does come to 30 pages. It sounds a lot, but as you say, those service sections and the way those sections are structured is kind of a page per service section, which you can get through that in seconds if it's not a service you've interacted with.
So in the high 20s, depending on font and so forth, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to see how that flies with our residents. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Aidan Underwine.
Yeah, thank you very much. Large overlap with what other people have said, so I'll try not to repeat. So on the question of length of the survey, when I was looking through it, I mean, as well as the length of it, and you've had some points, and I'm trying to recruit them, it did occur to me to wonder whether that level of nuance is something that people, your average resident, will really have. I think there are 12 different service areas, and a lot of people interacting with the council don't sort of break down their interactions in that way. I appreciate you want to get that level of granularity, I mean, when you're sort of reflecting on these comments, maybe thinking about ways in which one can allow residents to give an overall view without necessarily needing to think through that granularity in a way that is actually useful to you. Because, yeah, I mean, we're all aware of the differences between some of these parts of the council, but a lot of people won't be. That was just a general comment to sort of reflect on, really. My question is about the targeting of people to respond to the survey. On paragraph 24, we've got three groups, three ways of dividing it up. I'll leave the sort of polling survey aside. But you've got this council's best value duties groups, and then sort of a general group. And the council does a lot of surveys, does them very well, thinks about who it would be good to get responses from, targets them, often successfully, sometimes not so well, and learns from that. And I was wondering, this is phrased in a particular way, the council's best value duties, in a way that I haven't really seen before. And I was wondering whether that's because of the way that we got here with the history of the interaction with central government on this, or whether it's that's just the normal way we have to do things, which looking at the legislation, I think it is, and we're just expressing it in a slightly formal way. Because if it is just the way we do it in normal legislation, is the list of sort of groups that are listed in 28, is that who we think we should target, or are there some other groups that we would target if it wasn't for this particular way of phrasing the legislation? Because it feels a little bit, presented like that feels a little bit artificial. I just don't want to feel like we're having to tick a box with this rather than just do what we normally do, which is talk to the people we really think we need to talk to.
Thank you for that, Councillor Van der Waal. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. I'm going to start off, and then I'm going to ask John Murphy to pick up on the sort of legal advice we've had on this.
Okay.
So, in relation to, you're saying, Councillor Van der Waal, that do we need all these service areas covered in such detail? You have no idea how many hours we've spent going through this, and the fact is that we have all these services which are customer-facing services. So, how do we decide to miss one out? How do we decide we'll miss out revs and bends, but we'll keep planning? Because all of these services are the most important service to somebody. So, if we want this to be really valid, and we want it to be, legally unchallengeable, really, we have to put it all in there. It's absolutely up to people how much they go through it, and people have the opportunity, if they want, to avoid, to just skim through, avoid all the box ticking bit and just fill in the text boxes. They can do whatever they want, really. But yes, as I say, so we have it's been through a lot of iterations, and it's very different now to how it was sort of 6 months ago. But if I could bring in John Murphy, please, Chair, on the second very important point.
John Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. The general principle is public bodies have a broad discretion in how they carry out their consultation, except where they don't. There you have it from the lawyer. In this case, looking at paragraphs, and I'm looking at the screen, 26, 27, 28, that's one of the areas where we don't have broad discretion, because under the best value duty to consult, we're told we must consult with certain bodies. And that's set out in the report. So that is why it may look odd, it may look a bit clunky, but that is, in my opinion, satisfying the legal duty under the best value guidance.
If I might come back on that, that's really, really helpful. First, just on the questionnaire point, our job is to scrutinise how you got to this point, and for you to justify it, and you have. So I'm really not saying it's wrong and you should do it differently. But I appreciate it. There's been a lot of thought put into it. So on the best, that's really helpful. So we have to do the stuff in sort of 24A and those paragraphs. However, so this is a question for more the sort of a non-legal question is, have we thought about who we would want to consult on in a sort of more general way than we do normally with consultations? Which groups do we want to target? Who we would want to, setting aside the need to target particular groups. So when we're doing a planning consultation, we think, well, who's going to be affected by this planning? So, because at the moment, the only targeting that's being done is the best value duties targeting, and the survey, the sort of more general survey, section B, isn't targeted. It's just sort of put it out there and see who answers. So if there were some groups that we would want to hear from that aren't in the list in 28, could we? Yeah. Has there been a process of thinking through what groups we target separate from the best value?
Absolutely.
Because I can think of some, but
yeah. So B allows us to mop up everybody. So anybody who wants to take part in the consultation can take part in it. So we're not excluding anybody. But in order for this to be really meaningful, there needs to be this element of targeting of service users. It's different from a local plan consultation. Local plan consultation is, we're aiming at, well, we do specialist work targeting young people and so on and so forth. But that, that's people living in South Cambridgeshire. But this is very specific to, we need that information from service users as well as it being open to
I appreciate it. It is open to everybody, but are there any groups that we want to hear from that are not listed in 28?
Well,
has that been thought about?
I don't think so, but I'd be interested in...
Young people are not in 28, I don't believe, because they're not liable to pay tax. They're not, so therefore they're not included. Children, and someone under 18 isn't... I mean, it's an example. Yeah. I'm just thinking, has that... It's a process worth going through. Yeah.
Those groups that aren't, that we don't have to consult for legal reasons, they are all picked up by the 1,000, group, because that is a representative sample of those who live in South Cambs. So the young, for example, that aren't represented there, because as you say, they're not council taxpayers, will be represented through the the representative sample that will be undertaken. Okay. So it's very much like the representative sample actually will give us a pretty good understanding of where people stand, what people's experience have been right across the various socio-demographic. But the other bit is very much it's down to whoever responds. That's why we're doing. That's why you can't just do a survey of that you invite people to respond to. You'll understand this, because all you'll get are the people that respond to that survey. So that's why we have to do a separate survey, which is a representative sample, and that's where and so that actually is more important than the views of individuals in one way. It's great to understand the personal experience of individuals, but the real evidence comes from that survey of the representative groups across the council.
Okay. Yeah. I don't want to labour it more, but I think there's probably an opportunity also. I do agree entirely with your point that you get that range through the 1,000 survey, but whether there's some additional targeting as well that might be able to be done. Just to live with that.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Bygott.
Thank you, Chairman. So, in a consultation about the 4-day week, why are we not asking the obvious question? Do you support a 4-day week? Yes or no? That's my first question. Secondly, if people do write a whole essay about how much they're opposed to the 4-day week, is anybody going to keep a running total of that? Or are people wasting their time putting something in there?
Sorry, could you repeat the second question, please?
Are we going to keep a running total of people who say, I'm opposed to the 4-day week in the text box?
So yes will be the answer.
Sorry, I haven't
So yes is the answer to the second part of the question. Are you ready for me to answer?
No, I've got a few more
Okay,
parts of my question.
Let's take those two first,
Come back.
and then I'll come back to you. So I think Councillor Bridget Smith has answered the second point there, in that yes, we will have that raw data and it will be collated how many people are against. And on the first point,
so what you're suggesting is that we run a referendum, and that's meaningless because we are a service provider, and what is meaningful is people's experiences of our services, and so that's what we are doing. And as I said, there's free text boxes, so people can put whatever they want in the free text box, and the introduction includes quite a long explanation of the 4-day week working model, so people absolutely know what this is about. But the whole purpose of the 4-day week trial was to address the very serious problems we had in recruitment and retention that was impacting negatively on our services. And therefore, that's what we need to look at. We know that it's had a dramatically beneficial effect on our recruitment and our retention. And all our evidence is that it has had a beneficial effect on our services. And the point of this survey is to corroborate or otherwise what our service users' experiences have been.
Councillor Tom-Bygot.
So I'll just come back in my supplementary to the first bit, and then I'll ask my next question. So what you're saying is that it will be tabulated, or a running total will be kept of how many people say something to say they're against, so that if 87% of respondents say, I do not support the 4-day week, then you will publish a thing that says 87% of people wrote in the box they don't support it.
So we will be analysing what is in the text boxes. I'm going to ask Gareth to come in and tell me, how we're going to be doing that, and how we are going to be presenting that free text information.
Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. So what I'd expect from the data company through the conversations, and there's more detail to follow, so this is a helpful point to have a scrutiny meeting, is you'll see the thematic responses coming back. So I think that the way the question's designed, it gives the opportunity to provide a broad range of commentary, and I couldn't give you what those themes will be yet because it depends on the responses that come through that particular question. So it will have the thematic responses, and I think it will give you an understanding of kind of scale, but I think your question is heading towards a different question, which is a yes-no question, which gives you a percentage, which I think the leaders answered that one, but hopefully that helps.
Okay. We are not, this is not a referendum, and we will not allow it to become a referendum because that is not meaningful and is not useful to this council. This council's focus is on people's experiences of our services.
Okay. Your next point?
Thank you very much. So the next question, all but one of the versions go on to a question that starts, imagine you're considering applying for a job and the employer offered a 4-day week as standard. So we don't ask that question to the employers or other organisations, but we ask it to everybody else. So of the different versions, it's in all the others. Why are we asking people to put themselves in the position of an employee looking for a job, and not to put themselves in the employee of a taxpayer funding an organisation or a shareholder investing in a business? And are we not likely to get a very positive and optimistic response from this part? If somebody asked me, would you like to get 100% of your salary for 80% of the days? Of course I'd say yes, because like many of our staff, I'd want to moonlight and do a second job. So obviously, I'm gonna say yes to that. So my question is that going to give us a biased view of what people think?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Okay,
We'll
so,
come back.
all right,
We'll
to start with, actually, I think your use of the word moonlighting is deeply offensive to our staff, and I'd ask you to withdraw it.
He said he would do it personally.
Yes, I said I would do that personally. I didn't say that. I wasn't criticising.
There's a word that has cropped up in the last week, and people seem to be getting rather attracted to it. Anyway, moving on from that. It is a... I don't know if you obviously you weren't listening to Radio 4 this morning, this afternoon at 12 o'clock. There's a very interesting programme on the 4-day week, Radio 4, which is available as a podcast. And actually, one of the employers who actually trialled a 4-day week and didn't continue with it in its purest form, actually said that when they talked to their employees about it, they expected everyone to go, yes, brilliant, that's marvellous. And actually, that wasn't the case. People had concerns about it. So I think it's naive to think that the automatic response is, yes, that's great, because actually, people are more intelligent than that, and they think through, what it actually means for them. So I think this is a really interesting question, and I think it is meaningful, and I think it is probably quite helpful to ask people, and they don't have to, but ask them to put themselves in the position of somebody working a 4-day week and actually give a bit of a thought to what it would be like. So I think I'm very pleased that question's in there. I think it's a valuable question.
Thank you. I think that's clear. Your next point, Councillor Byron.
We're not going to have any view of whether, as a taxpayer, people would like to fund a 4-day week. We are going to get a view of whether they would like to be an employee working in that way. And suppose then we get an enormously large sum, I don't know, 87% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So I might say 87% of people say, yes, I'd love to be an employee in that circumstance. What purpose are we going to use that information for? Are we going to shout from the rooftops how wonderful the 4-day week is because so many people would like to have a job that works that way?
Thank you. Councillor Williams, John Williams.
Thank you. Well, I think as I said at the start in response to previous question from Stephen, the purpose of this survey is in one way to give us added value to our KPIs and also to the other reports that come to this council. Now, if you're on staffing committee, for example, you will know that we do interviews when people join, and one of the things they say is that they have joined us because they like the idea of a 4-day week. Now, what is wrong in using this survey to see whether or not that is a valid reason, and there is evidence behind that to suggest that yes, people would see us as a preferred employer because we offer a 4-day week and a particular type of 4-day week. So that, as I say, going back to what the purpose of this survey is, and the purpose of this survey is to provide evidence for you to then make a decision. Now, it's not a referendum. A referendum comes every 4 years when our electors vote for us or otherwise. That's where the referendum occurs, and that's what we do in this country. And very rarely, apart from Brexit, where obviously a few people now wish they hadn't voted a certain way, but people did, and we have to honour that. But that's the way we do democracy in this country. We don't have referendums for every change we make on this council.
Councillor Tom Bygott, your
So
final thing.
We don't have a referendum for everything we do, but we don't have a referendum for the most important thing we've done in the last 4 years.
So
very briefly.
Yeah. So look, if I just give the same response I gave in Cabinet. the vast majority of our residents and businesses care about the services they receive. You know, they want their bins collected, they want their council houses maintained, they want their planning permission given, they want their, their local taxi to be licensed. They care not a jot about who's doing it. They don't care which council's doing it. They don't care if people are working full-time, part-time, compressed hours, from home, in the office, or if it is, if it's contracted out to other people. What people care about is their services. And that's what this consultation is going to be looking at.
Thank you. Councillor James Hobro.
Thank you, Chair. So I had a couple of brief comments and then one slightly more detailed question. The first two comments really relate closely to some of the previous questions. The first was about the time it takes to fill in an online survey. And I think it's important that there's an indication given at the beginning of the time. And I would suggest that, I think you mentioned something about a maximum of 15 minutes. If we give the maximum, it might end up putting people off. Perhaps we ought to give the average time based on a test and sample or something like that. Okay. Because giving a maximum time, it might make it sound as if it's likely to take longer than it actually would. Secondly, I'd like to second what Councillor Sanford said about the printed versions. I really do feel that 30 pages is a lot. And if there's some way of condensing it into a much more compact, if we're planning to use a lot of, I don't know how many printed replies we're expecting to get, but so if it is substantial, then I think it might be worth. So
the first point's noted. I think it's only 23 pages, but it's still a heck of a lot. It's still a heck of a lot of pages. But yeah, absolutely, okay, we're taking that away.
Thank you. So then I had a question about the preamble. So I'm looking at the preamble for the version for the South Cambridgeshire residents. I don't know how much it differs from the other preambles. So the preamble takes us through the reasons for the trial. It talks about the recruitment and retention problem. And then it talks about the fact that it was very hard to deal with before this trial. And then it talks about the reports on the performance and well-being, saying that these were generally positive. What the preamble doesn't say is whether or not we regard it as having been successful at solving the recruitment and retention problem. And I think Councillor Smith said earlier that it has been very successful at doing that. And so it just seemed a bit strange to begin the preamble by talking about the recruitment and retention problem and not to say whether or not we feel that it's actually solved that problem.
Councillor
It's a very good point, and we'll take that away. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we'll take it away and discuss it. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions, as you can imagine. I'll start off with actually when this was brought and shown to myself, we did actually ask for screenshots of how the online survey would look in the report. Very disappointed that's not in there, because I think a lot of the questions that were asked today could have been resolved had they actually seen the process. So
we can put that up if you want.
Yeah, I think we were asking questions of style and format. That could have been resolved.
Well, we can do it. We can do it if you want it now. Okay. We can do it.
I think we're saying it's not in the report.
It's not in the report.
Well,
Yeah. So noted. Yeah.
Might have been difficult. It might have reproduced badly or something, but we can.
Screenshots tend to be quite clear. The other question I have, Chair, is the selection of 1 to 5 as opposed to 1 to 10, because we know through analysing data and going through actually the broader scope, the clearer picture you can have, because there can be a great degree between 4 and 5, and actually 0 to 10 is a more preferred option normally. So wondering why that has been used. Let's
pause there. The ratios.
Well, it would have been 43 pages printed out if we'd done 1 to 10. This was the advice we had, that this was going to be most meaningful. Does Gareth want to?
I think you've answered the question, so we'll come back. Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, when I raised the issue of 0 to 10, and on all of these scales, I do think that they should be horizontal as opposed to vertical, because otherwise you're naturally inclined to go to the top. whereas actually if you have a left to right rather than a top to bottom, you normally get a more valid response and a more reflective response. So I'm wondering if you'd consider doing that scale and switching it around. Also, I just wondered, in relation to the volume of questions, it is an awful lot of questions. And going actually back to what other councillors have said and raised that, one thing that could have been done, particularly for online, again, something that we've raised before, is a situation where you type in your service and then by using actually the background software, you can then use word clouds to then break people down. So people say, empty my bins, or did a planning application. We break down that and process that for them rather than asking them to do the hard work, and that potentially would have had a better result. So just wondering why that opportunity wasn't taken.
Shall we pause there and take that question?
Because I think not everybody, I think because people don't know what services South Cambridgeshire deliver. They get people, they might be getting, school transport for a disabled child. They might be getting, care for an elderly relative. So it's because, generally speaking, people don't know what the district services are. So that's why we have to be specific about it.
Councillor Heather Williams.
But equally, people, if you say electoral services, people won't necessarily know what that is. So I think there is a way to make it more accessible than it currently is. Also, you've put these dates in, and understanding why, because you want it pre and post trial. However, would it not have been better to do a survey before and after? Because if I ask the leader, what were you doing on the 18th of December 2022, and what were you doing on the 4th of January 2023, I think you would really struggle to know what you were doing on what year. I definitely would. I know I've reported my bin being missed, but whether I did it in 22 or 23, it's too long a gap. So how on earth can it be seen as reasonable to be putting in those comparisons? Do you really think people will be able to accurately to do this so far down the line?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So if I just remind you about the process we've been through. We started off with a 3-month trial. It's a pre-trial, which gave us the confidence to extend it. You can't consult on whether to carry out a trial. I mean, that's just nonsense, I'm afraid. And we did the 3-month trial initially, which was very, very low risk, and the results clearly demonstrated positive outcomes. And we then trialled for longer, and we hoped to consult in March last year. But due to the previous government's threat of financial penalties, we couldn't. And that's why, we are, months and months down the line, and this time frame has been extended. Wasn't our will to do it, but we could not consult because we did not know until the last spending review, financial settlement. We didn't know until the recent financial settlement that there were no financial penalties going to be levied on councils who trialled different modes of working. So, we are where we are, but there was an awful lot of stuff that was outside of our control.
Okay. Councillor Heather Williams.
So just as supplementary, and then I do have 2 others, Chair.
Okay.
All the way through this evening, we've been told this isn't a consultation in relation to 4 days. This is a consultation about services. So why was there no consultation done on services even after the 3 months when people could have actually given a reflection, a comparator? And what provision are we giving for the fact that people are really unlikely or may not even lived here prior to the trial?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Because 3 months wouldn't have been long enough.
It's not.
And also
about,
in 3 months we hadn't
Chair,
introduced it into the waste service either.
It's not about. It's not about having the consultation of the trial. It's about having a data set so you can actually tell people's experiences. Rather than asking them to retrospectively think back 2 years, had you done a data set of their experiences of the services first, done the trial, then asked for it after, you would have true comparators. unfortunately, that hasn't happened.
So we monitor, we monitor our performance all the time. You know, one of the ways we do that is through key performance indicators, you know, which include things like complaints and compliments and so on. So, you know, that's just the way councils work.
Could I just elaborate on this point? So I think one of my questions was around comparative data, which the leader has just touched on. And she used the example of KPIs, you know, prior to the trial starting, essentially. If we are intending just to compare to the KPIs, we could do that now, couldn't we, with our existing KPIs? I think that the question that I have is, if we are going to have this survey now, what are we really comparing it to prior to the trial taking place to make it meaningful? Because if all of the residents come back and say, South Cambridgeshire District Council has got terrible services or amazing services, what is that really telling us in relation to the 4-day working week if we haven't done a comparator prior to that trial? We can compare KPIs. So I think, sorry to interrupt your question, but I think that's what we're getting at. Councillor John Williams.
I think, as I pointed out at the beginning, that the purpose of this is to, in a way, add value to the KPIs. We have been using the KPIs to judge the effect of the 4-day week trial. The purpose of this survey is to check that those KPIs are actually giving us the correct information. Now, if you say that people come back and say, no, the services have all been rubbish, then we need to understand why our KPIs have not been telling us that. And it's our KPIs that we have been basing the success or otherwise of the trial. So that's the purpose of this survey. The purpose of this survey is not to do a before and after. It's to test whether or not the KPIs that we have been using to test the trial are actually accurate. And as I pointed that out at the beginning of this meeting.
Thank you very much. We'll move on, because I don't think we're going to seek agreement on this. But so another point, Councillor Williams.
Yes, although I would say if it's not about before and after, why is every single question about before and after? So on my next question, it relates to the costings which are in the report, and it says about savings. And one of the costs that have taken out of that is because we need to get 2 more bin lorries. And my understanding is from reports that that's 55,000 per annum over 8 years for the 2 bin lorries. That would suggest that the costs that have been taken off relate to diesel lorries, but we also know the ambition of the council is to have more electric lorries, which are more expensive. Now, the last time I can find a cost for an electric bin lorry was 375,000, and obviously you'd have 2 of those. So is it a case of when we get these lorries, we're putting 2 more diesel lorries onto the roads of South Cambridgeshire, or are the figures incorrect and they're going to be electric bin lorries, but then we won't have quite the saving?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So, Chair, that is outside the remit of this agenda item, which is about whether this consultation.
Page 134, paragraph 19 in the report, Chair.
It is stated in the report regarding the costings around the bin lorries.
Yeah, but we're talking about the consultation, so I think the requirement...
I think we can scrutinise the report as well as the consultation, so I'm happy if you would come back with an answer on that point around, are the figures in relation to diesel lorries or electric lorries? I don't expect you to know that off the top of your head, but we can come back to it with a written response maybe.
I shall think, yes. So but the recommendation here says it's recommended the committee notes the proposed approach to the 4-day week consultation, provides the leader with comments and recommendations before the leader's decision notice. And that's far more useful to us. But yeah, I will give consideration to coming back.
Thank you very much.
Question.
Thank you. And because I think one of the things to consider when people doing the consultation is if they are to be diesel, then we ought to look at the carbon impact of that as opposed to if they are electric. And if they are electric, alter the figure.
Yeah.
So the last thing.
Very briefly, because we need to move on. Yeah.
The last thing that I would like to raise is actually something similar, unsurprisingly, in relation to Councillor Bygot's question about the fact that there does seem to be one question very much missing. And I've listened to the responses that have been given to those questions, and lots of, actually we didn't use the word referendum in that question, but the leader has referred to it. And just to be clear, a referendum is an advisory poll, and lots of councils take them for all different sorts of purposes, and to just sense check with their residents. And I think those exercises are always meaningful. But what I can't quite understand is, having been told this is all about services, and all the way through today it's all about services, when it comes to the question about whether or not you want to work for this council, which is the question that was referred to, about would we be a more attractive employer, the only question that is not a free text box, but the only actual question on the 4-day week, why is that appropriate and meaningful when it does not relate to services, but the question of whether people want to pay for it or not suddenly isn't meaningful or relate to services?
Councillor John Williams.
Yeah, I have to correct the Leader of Opposition. As she well knows, the 4-day week is actually saving us money. It's not costing us money. So to tell council taxpayers that it's costing them money actually is not true, because we have made savings as a result of the 4-day week.
I use the word funding, and by the fact they are paying the salaries of every single employee of this council, they are funding the salaries and they are funding how this money is spent. So yes, it is the residents' money. It is not our money.
Yeah. So
Will I get a response to my question, Chair, do you think?
So I don't think we're actually asking people if they want to come and work for the council, which is what you said. So I don't think we're actually saying that.
Okay, I think we'll leave
I think we've already covered that.
We'll leave that there. I've got Councillor Drew, Councillor Richard Williams indicating to speak online as well. Have we got any other speakers? Okay, Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a quick question, and I do just want to pick up on that last point, because the leader and Councillor John Williams has made great play that this is a survey all about council services, and that we're only of value really if we provide good services. So again, why on earth are we asking a question about whether you would work for a 4-day week employer? That's got absolutely nothing to do with the provision of council services. So why is it in this survey?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So Councillor Williams has answered that, and he said this is about corroborating what our own staff surveys are saying about, and particularly from our new staff, over 70% of which. So we've already answered that.
Fine. I will go next, I think, and then I'll let you go last. Is that all right? So I've just got a quick question, because I think most has been covered. The two very brief things. The first is on the costing of the consultation. It's not stated how much the consultation will cost, so that's the first one. The second one was around where we have in the text box at the end, we talk about sort of other comments in that box after you've done all the yes/no questions, essentially. But I didn't know whether it should say other comments, because the rest of them are sort of yes/no questions rather than questions that you actually write a response into. So that's just a small point. I think everything else has been sort of covered. I think my major point was on the comparisons, but we've had that debate already. So I think those are my 2 points. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So noted on the text box. God, I'm getting tired. I've already forgotten what the first question was.
That's okay. It was how much would the consultation
cost? Oh, right, cost, yes. So we think we estimate about 90,000.
90,000. Thank you for that. Councillor Drew.
If we just come back to something you talked about a number of questions ago regarding the way in which the consultation survey was drawn up. Can you just give us a bit more of an explanation? You may wish to defer to Officer in this regard. Can you just give a bit more of an explanation from a sort of principle and technical perspective of the way in which the questions have been drawn up, and perhaps why we've ended up with this model, and what the advice and guidance is from those who are experts in the drawing up of consultations and surveys? Because obviously lots of the questions we were asking represent our views as people who may well use the survey, as councillors, as residents as well. But obviously when these things are done in a very technical way, I would assume, Councillor Smith, you have not personally sat and drawn up this survey, and that clearly, as you referred, we've had guidance. So maybe just a bit of an explanation of exactly how that has worked.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to have to ask Gareth to sort of talk us through the process. I mean, obviously, well, John and I in particular have had input. Mine as an ex-teacher on, you know, how on grammar and how we phrase things and our use of language. And I think it's been my contribution to it. But I'm sure Gareth can talk you through what has been quite a long and complex process. Please.
Gareth Bell.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I'll go back to a point earlier in the sort of debate on this one, which is, and I think John Murphy mentioned this as well, in regard to consultations, we do have quite a lot of leeway in regards to how we consult, and it is a choice for the council to make. We have, of course, drawn on the expertise of organisations supporting us, but there is leeway in regards to a consultation, in regards to how you approach that, the questions you'd ask. But the idea of a consultation is to get rich feedback, and that's what we're looking for to enable councillors to make an informed decision.
And just to round us and finish. Obviously, the questions that have been asked tonight do to some extent reflect the positions taken by different councillors in relation to the 4-day week, and we are very conscious of the fact that it is a significant topic of debate. I note that you have effectively like the second tier, as it were, that's the wrong phrase. I note that you obviously have the 1,000 residents and business owners and others who are going to be talked at as well. And obviously it will be open for people to do things. Can I just ask, is there any control mechanism to reflect the fact that although South Cambridgeshire District Council is one district council who is doing this, we know that this issue has become incredibly political on a national scale. So is there any control mechanism or any way in which the likely involvement in this consultation process as a website and something being online may well attract people from outside the area to fill it in, who may well have strong views in that regard? Or is that impossible?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So can I go to Gareth, please? I think I know the answer.
Gareth Bell.
Thank you, Chair. It's a point that, as you'd expect, we have certainly discussed with our consultation experts. Any consultation has the same risk, and if it's a consultation that you feel is more open that may be the case, it's something you need to consider more. So I think our data company are experienced in regards to spotting trends and patterns in regard to responses, and that's something that we've made sure that they're aware of. They will obviously use their expertise to report back to you as councillors whether there's anything that they think you need to be aware of in regard to the data coming back. I think our statistically valid survey, our 1,000 residents and 400 businesses, gives us more confidence in regard to the ability to provide good data for councillors to look at. And lastly, probably one of the measures that we've put in place is our consultation platform requires a registration. So again, that provides some additional kind of reassurance. But it definitely is something we're very aware of and something that we'll be monitoring, and we'll be taking the advice through the responses from our data company.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have any other speakers on this issue. So we will go to the recommendation on page 131. And I think we have done what we've been asked to do on there. I would like to thank the Cabinet for staying for a very long meeting, Leader of the Opposition and our officers. I think we'll move on to the work programme, which is pages 223 to 236. If you want to. Any comments on that at all, the work programme? Yeah, I was going to mention the fact that East West Rail is coming up on that, and we will probably postpone that due to the current consultation that's going on. It's quite difficult, I think, to properly scrutinise that at this time, but it's not coming off the agenda, it's just going to be delayed somewhat, and that leaves some gaps in the work programme, but we've got lots of things coming up that we can fill the agenda with. I normally have a problem with too many things rather than not enough. Yes, and civil parking enforcement, we still want to be looking at that, so it's something else that's coming up on the agenda, but I know Gareth Bell is aware of that, so I've spoke to him. So, anything else on that? Okay, well, we will move on. So the date of the next, sorry, Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. It was just, there are obviously with things coming out of national government in relation to councillors, so I sat on a focus group because they're looking at doing sort of sanctions and different things in relation to government. I know the councils will be expected to respond, so I hope that those will be coming through scrutiny before they respond to the LGA, because they do affect everybody as a whole. And
we have triangulation meetings with the leader and deputy leader of the council as well to look at exactly those things. So the date of the next meeting is the 6th of March at 5:30. So that concludes business on the agenda. So we'll come off. Lovely.